While Lin Yuan was not a true swordsman, being at the third level of the airborne realm was not enough for him to be able to sleep soundly in Jianghu City without any worries. His strongest weapon was to feed Guan Shanxue with his blood aura day and night without using any of the system's skills. Your grim demon Guan Zhaoshan? Following a question that sounded like a statement, a slender white figure appeared in the room. Shua, without any hesitation Lin Yuan's Guan Shanxue slashed out. The difference between his own realm and the opponent's realm allowed him to know the specific effects of the opponent's attribute panel once the Eye of God was activated. Guan Shanxue did not have any special abilities and only had a few unorthodox martial arts. Even if he was an average airborne realm cultivator or even an airborne realm cultivator with no future, he might not be able to make a breakthrough to the heavenly strength realm even if he died. A piece of trash that was not qualified to make Lin Yuan use his blade nurturing technique, but it was good to use him as a warm-up. You have a bad temper that doesn't match your pretty face. The man in white smiled and flipped his right hand. An iron folding fan appeared in his hand, and he casually went to meet Guan Shanxue. Clang. Sparks flew when the weapons collided. The man in white's face stiffened slightly. He looked at the iron folding fan, which was completely covered in frost, and the frost that began to spread to his right hand. He cried out, "A magic item?" Lin Yuan remained silent. He drew his sword and swung it again, going straight for the man's face. At this moment Lin Yuan's face changed slightly. When Guan Shanxue was still 3 centimeters away from the man in white's face, he abruptly stopped the momentum of the sword. He tapped his foot and directly broke out of the window. His figure was as fast as a ghost. After a few breaths, Lin Yuan had already appeared in a mansion. Lin Yuan quickly walked into the study and tapped a bookshelf several times in a row according to the rhythm in his memory. Accompanied by a soft crisp sound, a secret door opened from the ground not far away. Immediately Lin Yuan stepped into it, and with another crisp sound of the secret door closing, his whole person was hidden in the darkness. This was a safe house. It was made by the embroidered uniform guards. Back then, Qinyu, Zhao Guangchong and the others were attached to the south to carry out the mission. Naturally, it was impossible for them to directly kill their way out in the south like Taishan. Before they left, the embroidered uniform guards quickly operated. Each Chiliarch bought mansions and built secret passages and shelters. Except for the parts that they were responsible for, the safe houses that the other Chiliarchies were responsible for were all kept secret. Even if Lin Yuan's enemies knew that he was hiding in the safe house, unless they could capture all the embroidered uniform guards who were responsible for building the safe house, they could only try their luck. Of course, capturing them was one thing. If they hoped that the embroidered uniform guards created by Lin Yuan would betray him, they would have to rely on the taboo mind control ability. A simple interrogation by torture was meaningless. Moreover, the underground shelter of the safe house also needed to be opened according to a specific rhythm. If the rhythm was wrong, then the entrance would be directly blown up. Not only would it waste time to clean it up, but it would also give a warning to those hiding underground. At the same time, there were secret passages leading to other shelters and secret exits underground, including food, water, and other preparations. It was almost to the extreme of caution. However, Lin Yuan didn't expect that when Qinyu and the others were in the south, they didn't use the safe house. After it was built, it had always been in an abandoned state. Except for the embroidered uniform guards who lurked in the south occasionally coming back to exchange information and clean up, these safe houses were basically not used. It could be said that since the safe house was built, the first person to use the underground shelter was actually Lin Yuan himself, who was in charge of the northern frontier remotely controlling the overall situation. After a cup of tea. Endless sea, Willowstone Sea. Your summoning disrupted my plan. I need a reasonable explanation. Lin Yuan's main body slowly opened his eyes, looked at the puppet body that released him and said coldly. Although the other party was just a strand of divine sense, other than not being able to exert 100% of its strength, it was almost no different from him. Logically speaking, if nothing major happened, it would not release its main body and use divine sense to communicate with him to call him back. Chapter 780. The puppet maintained its cold appearance and said indifferently, "What you're worried about didn't happen." However, the higher-ups of the Sea Demon Guild that you asked Cyrus to contact arrived at the Willowstone region yesterday. He's probably an ancestral demon powerhouse and could tell that I'm just a clone at a glance. He also told me that if you're sincere about cooperating, you should use your real body to communicate with him instead of using a clone to brush him off. That's all? Lin Yuan's eyelids twitched slightly as he resisted the urge to curse. If it wasn't for the fact that the other party was also him, he would have killed him. The white-robed man from before was most likely not from an aristocratic family or sect. After all, Guan Zhaoshan's resume was there, and the Flying Star sect was obviously standing on the opposite side. Even if Guan Zhaoshan's aptitude was noticed, those sects would have to think twice whether they coveted those rumored treasures, inheritances, or simply wanted to accept Guan Zhaoshan as their disciple. The Flying Star sect was not to be trifled with. A Kongming realm ancestor, 3 half-step Kongming realm elders, and a sect master who could break through to the Kongming realm at any time. This did not include the hidden forces that might exist. Just on paper their strength was so strong. Without a certain foundation, they would not dare to come into contact with the hot potato that was Guan Zhaoshan. Even if they did come into contact, the person who came should have a high status in the sect. If they were not sincere, they would not have gained Guan Zhaoshan's trust, let alone the Flying Star sect. As for the white-robed man, whether it was in terms of strength or cultivation method, they could be said to be trash among trash. It was even inferior to the mental cultivation method that came with the third-rate martial arts, the Thousand Mountain Saber technique. This mental cultivation method was, after all, a way to circulate qi to support the saber technique. It was not impossible to use it for cultivation, but breaking through to the Heaven Star realm was the limit. A sect that could nurture a Kongming realm cultivator, even an outer disciple, would not cultivate such a low-level cultivation method. A sect of that level would not send a servant disciple to come in contact with someone like Guan Zhaoshan, who could stir up a storm in the south, right? Therefore that guy was most likely a Lulan cultivator. It was equivalent to giving attribute points and reputation to him. But because of such a small matter he let him go just like that. He did not know if that guy would flee at the sight of him when he returned. My situation is special after all. Even if I wanted to explain he probably wouldn't believe me. The puppet shrugged helplessly and shook its head. So, for the sake of that plan I can only summon you back. Normally speaking, even if one had reached the ancestral demon realm, it was impossible for one's divine sense to be completely independent. That was because that was the authority of a god. As mentioned before, Lin Yuan built some temples of the Black Water Dragon King in the north and attached a wisp of his divine thoughts to the Dragon King sculptures in those temples. By listening to the prayers of believers and receiving incense offerings, these divine thoughts slowly grew. If the time was long enough, these divine thoughts could even break away from Lin Yuan and become an independent existence. At the current stage, it was impossible for these will to exist independently. However, after they returned to the main body and separated into different objects, they could barely become clones with the same memories and personality as Lin Yuan. However, they were not independent existences. Lin Yuan was still the main body and would not give birth to their own will. However, they all had the same way of thinking as Lin Yuan. Under various circumstances, they would make the same choice as Lin Yuan's main body. Therefore Lin Yuan was at ease to leave Willow Rock Waters to it. He descended into Guan Zhaoshan's body and prepared to move around in the south. Because in a sense, it was no different from Lin Yuan himself being in charge of the Lucier Sea area. It was just that it was an inferior product that couldn't do anything. Take me to see that guy. Lin Yuan spoke indifferently. The dissatisfaction in his tone had been restrained. Since he was already here, he might as well finish his business before leaving. He should be able to make it in time. However, the Siren Guild had yet to establish a new branch in Willow Rock Waters. After all, in a sense, the Siren Guild was only a loose guild system. Without absolute benefits, the Siren Guild's upper echelons could not even command their members at will. Therefore they did not have much say. Want to establish a branch in different waters? If it were the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas, they could just give the order and be done with it. However, even if the Siren Guild was not inferior to the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas, they still had to carefully manage their relationship with the rulers of the various waters. Only then could they proceed with establishing a branch. Some weak and remote rulers of the waters would definitely have to be thick-skinned and carefully curry favor with the Siren Guild to see if they could promote the development of the waters through the Siren Guild's branch. However, the Willow Rock Waters was a region with local specialties, a good geographical location and decent strength. Naturally, the relationship between the two sides would have to be transferred. Therefore, when Lin Yuan's main body returned, the Siren Guild's upper echelon naturally had no reason to continue being pretentious. He quickly settled the matter at hand and appeared in front of Lin Yuan under Flood Dragon One's lead. Blackwater Dragon King, it's an honor to meet you at last. The Siren Guild's upper echelon, who looked like a crab boss, cupped his crab pincers at Lin Yuan and mimicked a human speech to Lin Yuan. However, due to the accent, the phrase, "It's an honor to meet you at last," sounded like raise a dog, raise a dog. Letting out a long sigh, Lin Yuan resisted the urge to correct the other party's pronunciation. He said in a deep voice, "The reason I invited you here this time is that we, the Willow Rock Waters, wish to establish a deeper level of cooperation with the Siren Guild. We're not like the other waters that only allow your guild to establish a branch here and let everything run its own course. If this matter is successful, it will be greatly beneficial to both you and me. I still don't know what your guild's attitude is. The guild will definitely have no problem with establishing a branch. After all, this is our livelihood." The crab boss smiled and suddenly changed the topic. "However, since the Dragon King mentioned a deeper level of cooperation, I would like to ask the Dragon King to elaborate as this matter is beyond my authority. I need to know the details first before I can make my own judgment and send a message to the headquarters so that the management of the headquarters can convene a meeting to discuss this matter." A slippery crap. Lin Yuan quickly made a judgment. His position in the Wu Jinhai was very awkward. He had the dragon's bloodline in his body, but he was disliked by the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas. He did not join the evil dragon faction and instead wanted to form his own faction. Anyone who got involved with him at this time might have to face the wrath of the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas in the future. Chapter 781. Under such circumstances, it was normal for the other party to decline when Lin Yuan proposed a deeper level of cooperation. If the crab boss agreed and could not wait to implement it, then Lin Yuan would feel guilty. However, time was limited and Lin Yuan was too lazy to use words. After briefly summarizing the idea of the trade city and the content of the cooperation with the Sea Demon Guild, he became silent and quietly waited for the crab boss response. Large-scale shopping platform, trading center, auction house, logistics. The crab boss gently chewed on the terms of Lin Yuan's ideas and his eyes lit up. The Sea Demon Guild was not a private property of any family or clan. Instead, it was a platform created by nearly 90% of the Sea Demon clans in the entire Endless Sea, except for the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas. It included a series of jobs such as mercenaries and caravans. It tried its best to develop the abilities and value of each sea demon. Therefore, to be able to become a high level in such an organization, even if the crab boss appearance was the same as the character in the cartoon of Lin Yuan's previous life, he could not be a good-for-nothing. On the contrary, the crab boss was definitely more intelligent and capable than what he showed. Therefore, after listening to Lin Yuan's idea, the crab boss realized the huge profit in it. Once the trade city that Lin Yuan mentioned was built, the Willowstone Sea area would quickly rise. Strength would not be able to restrict the development of the Willowstone Sea area. Just like how the Sea Demon Guild had a huge power, each clan had a limited number of sea demons. Even the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas could not break this limit. However, the Dragon Clan's bloodline was noble, and their individual strength was much stronger than other sea demons. Under such a big environment, once Lin Yuan's resources became rich, even if his strength was average, it would not be a problem. As long as he was willing to spend money, not to mention hiring a large number of sea demons that wandered in the Endless Sea, even making the Sea Demon Guild listen to his orders was just a matter of whether he had enough money. However, there was a problem now. After realizing the benefits that Lin Yuan mentioned, the first thought that came to Boss Crab's mind was whether he could follow Lin Yuan's train of thought and borrow the enormous power of the Siren Guild to build a trading city before Lin Yuan did. However, the thought only flashed through his mind and he quickly threw it out of his mind. In this world where the strong preyed on the weak, even a demon beast could not be underestimated. Keeping a trump card was always a natural instinct of creatures that lived in danger all year round. With the Blackwater Dragon King's reputation in the Sky Martial continent, how could he possibly be so unguarded, sharing his thoughts one by one, and then allowing others to plagiarize and plagiarize? The answer was obviously no. Lin Yuan was definitely hiding some trump cards. The only reason he was willing to share his thoughts was because he didn't care that the Siren Guild was ahead of him in establishing a trade city. Why was he like this? It was because he had enough confidence. If the Siren Guild cooperated with him honestly, they could still get a mouthful of soup. However, if the Siren Guild tried to make Lin Yuan's thoughts into their own, then Lin Yuan would definitely have the ability to make them bleed. If that day really came with Lin Yuan's special position in the Endless Sea, the Siren Guild would take action against him to vent their anger. They might even push the blame of plagiarizing Lin Yuan's thoughts onto him. Then again, even if they succeeded in plagiarizing, what benefits would it bring him? His position in the Siren Guild was not low, and there were many demon beasts waiting to be promoted. However, if he wanted to take a step forward, he would be restricted by his own strength. There was no possibility of that happening. If it did not help in raising his position, then what about the benefits? Obviously there was none. With his wealth, not to mention taking a big bite out of it, he might not even be able to invest in it. Dragon King's thoughts are indeed good. Although I don't know much about business, after listening to you, I can feel that this matter is very promising. Ah. Unknowingly, the way Boss Crab addressed Lin Yuan had changed to a respectful form of address. Lin Yuan, who was sitting opposite Boss Xie, was slightly nervous. He was not a dragon that would come from all directions. Half of the reason why he was able to achieve what he had today was because of the rapid improvement brought by the system, and the other half was because of the various aptitudes and practical character that he had learned in his previous life. He was obviously not the same type as those who needed to use a cheat in terms of personality and charisma. Therefore, after this kind of respectful form of address, there would usually be a but or something similar. The cooperation with the Siren Guild should not be a problem. Judging from Boss Crab's attitude, he had given up on plagiarism and planned to take more benefits from Lin Yuan. The benefits that I can give to the Siren Guild have already been compromised to the limit. With all due respect, the only work that is suitable for the Siren Guild is logistics. I can give up the security of the mall and other projects, but it is already out of my own pocket. At the same time, out of trust in your guild, I will entrust the safety of myself, the mall, and the traders to you, isn't that right? Before Boss Crab could speak, Lin Yuan had already spoken first. Although it was not necessary for the Siren Guild to join in, it was better than nothing. Otherwise, if they did it alone, although they could not really pose a threat to him, they could indeed take away a part of the traffic. At the same time, it would make him feel disgusted. In addition, with the temperament of the Dragon Clan of the Four Seas, when the Great Old Ones were hanging over their heads, they would not do anything that would make both sides unhappy for the time being. However, once the trouble of the Great Old Ones was solved, they would definitely return to their old ways. At that time, the entire Endless Sea might be swept away. The city of trade, which was rich with benefits, would naturally be on their hunting list. Although it was not that Lin Yuan could not guard the Endless Sea, it was indeed not necessary. If he tied himself to the Siren Guild and formed a community of interests, even the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas would have to think twice. If everything went well and this matter was over, he would leave a spiritual clone to control the puppet body, which would be enough to deal with the daily affairs of the city of trade. Well, Boss Crab smiled bitterly and clasped his fist. From a business point of view, the Dragon King has indeed given the Siren Guild enough face. He is even willing to give us the security work, which has exceeded my initial idea. However, from my point of view, looking at the delicious cake in front of me but not being able to take a bite, isn't it too cruel? Chapter 782. What do you mean? Lin Yuan's eyes narrowed slightly, and his body suddenly exuded a dangerous aura. Damn, I was too careless. I forgot that the Siren Guild is a free and loose organization. Even if it's not like the Men in Black organization in Detective Conan where almost all of its members are traitors, it's impossible to expect them to work together and push things in a good direction. When it's time to be calculative, when it's time to be selfish, it's time to be selfish. This guy must have seen the profits of the city of trade and wanted to eat until his mouth was full of oil before bringing in the Siren Guild. As the saying goes, the king of hell is easy to provoke, but the little demons are hard to deal with. With Boss Crab's current attitude, if Lin Yuan wasn't willing to pay, then he shouldn't expect to have a deep cooperation with the Siren Guild. But even if he was willing to pay, he couldn't deduct the benefits given to the Siren Guild. He had to use his own money to satisfy Boss Crab's appetite. Moreover, it must be a trade dividend and not a one-time expense. Isn't this using a blunt knife to cut his flesh? Dragon King, I'm afraid you misunderstood. I'm not asking for benefits from you. Boss Crab smiled bitterly and said softly when he saw Lin Yuan's aura suddenly become dangerous. The distracting thoughts in his mind were cleared once again. When the crab boss faced Lin Yuan, he had to face the facts. With Lin Yuan's strength, it might be difficult to kill him, but if he mobilized the entire force of the Willow Rock Waters, he wouldn't be able to leave this place alive. After all, if this cooperation didn't work out, he would have to report it to the higher-ups. Later on, the Siren Guild would definitely build a city of trade before Lin Yuan. Sooner or later, both sides would become mortal enemies. Lin Yuan only accelerated the process of this matter and also prevented the hidden danger of the city of trade project leaking out. What I mean is, when the people from the headquarters come to formally discuss the cooperation with you, I hope you can appoint my people to be responsible for the construction of the Willow Rock Waters branch. In return, I will help you persuade the higher-ups of the Siren Guild to kill the idea of copying your idea of building a city of trade in the bud. In addition, the Brave Crab Tribe is the same as my tribe. We are both branches of the Crab Tribe, but we don't have much authority. If our cooperation is successful, I will propose for the Brave Crab Tribe in the next Crab Tribe meeting to increase the priority of the resources given to the Brave Crab Tribe. This can be considered as indirectly strengthening your strength. Boss Crab stood up and faced Lin Yuan. Then he bowed slightly and said in a deep voice, "I hope you will consider it carefully. Your new business model will inevitably cause some Sea Demon clans to imitate it. If you cooperate with our Sea Demon Guild, you can at least ensure that those Sea Demon clans who imitate you will not dare to go too far, right?" Anyone with a discerning eye could see that Lin Yuan's idea was very profitable. Once this kind of business model, which had never been seen before in the Endless Sea, was launched, it would cause the other Sea Demon clans to imitate it and even suppress it. No matter what killing move Lin Yuan was hiding, it would still be troublesome. If the Siren Guild was the partner, they could indeed avoid this kind of trouble to the greatest extent. Moreover, after Lin Yuan joined hands with the Siren Guild, the credibility of both sides was far from what the other Sea Demon clans could compare to. This kind of project, even for the entire Siren Guild, was absolutely a high-quality project. Boss Crab wanted to seize this opportunity, and the other higher-ups of the Sea Guild would definitely not give it up easily. However, with Boss Crab's strength, he might not be able to compete with the other higher-ups of the Siren Guild. Thus, he could only inquire about Lin Yuan's words in advance and see if he could let this partner and investor appoint his people to be responsible for this matter. "I will think about it." Lin Yuan nodded slightly and fell into silence again. Jiao Yi also returned to the reception room and ordered the crab boss, who was full of expectations, to leave. Although Lin Yuan was not a businessman, since he wanted to establish a city of commerce, he definitely had to pursue profits. Although Boss Crab had stated his conditions, who could be sure that the other higher-ups of the Siren Guild who came to contact him would have conditions worse than his? If worst came to worst, he could just directly bid. The higher-ups of the Siren Guild who wanted to be in charge of the Willowstone Sea branch could directly sit together and use their own methods to see who could make Lin Yuan lower his head and agree to appoint the other party to be responsible. As the investor, Lin Yuan still had this bit of face. He was not afraid that the Siren Guild would flip the table. As for the higher-ups of the Siren Guild deciding who would be responsible for this matter, that was even more of a joke. If Lin Yuan insisted on appointing someone to be responsible, could the Siren Guild force people to come over? Once both sides reached an agreement, the Siren Guild would have the qualifications to flip the table. After Boss Crab was sent away, Lin Yuan turned his head and looked at the puppet body standing in the shadows. He said indifferently, "I still have things to deal with on my side. Keep an eye on things here. The next time there is something so arrogant, just get rid of it. Once our idea is understood by the Siren Guild, there will be plenty of people who are willing to cooperate. They have no right to raise conditions with us." Okay. The puppet nodded imperceptibly and didn't say anything else. After an incense's time, in the underground shelter of Jianghu City, Wang Zhaoshan, who was controlled by Lin Yuan, slowly opened his eyes. A cold light bloomed as he walked toward the exit of the tunnel. He didn't try to hide it at all. When he came out, he broke a writing brush and left directly. A safe house was a one-time consumable item. No matter how well it was hidden, once it was used multiple times, it would be discovered by the eyes hidden in the dark. The reason he broke the brush earlier was to leave a mark to inform the embroidered uniform guards hiding in the south that this safe house had already been used once. Other than the daily concealment, all other activities would be abolished and carried out in other safe houses. As soon as he went out, Lin Yuan saw a familiar person, through the eye of the god, walking through the nearby streets with a woman in embroidered clothes. Who else could it be if it was not the person in white who ambushed him in the inn and was summoned by the Divine Sense clone? Lin Yuan was speechless. There was a saying that good words could not persuade a damned ghost. This guy ambushed him and was almost killed. Not only did he not run away in the middle of the night, but he also dared to walk around with a young lady in Jianghu City? How big of a *king heart is this? Or, Lin Yuan's expression suddenly became strange. This guy actually did not realize the difference in strength between them. Did he think that Lin Yuan broke the window to escape because he was afraid? Chapter 783. Sister Wan, you don't have to worry about your father and the others. I went to the Red Dust Tavern not long ago, intending to meet the grim demon who has been in the limelight recently. Guess what? That woman is a soft-footed prawn. I took her down with just a few punches and kicks. If she didn't run away at the last moment, I would have already taken her head and given it to your father as a betrothal gift." Lin Yuan, who was following behind the man in white, could only remain silent as he listened to the shameless boasting of the man in white. However, the bulging veins on his forehead proved that Lin Yuan was not in a stable state at the moment. "You took me down with just a few kicks and punches? Why don't you go to heaven? You can't even take 2 hits from me." The man in white's right hand was wrapped in a thick leather glove. It was obvious that his right hand, which had been injured by Guan Xingshue's cold blade, had not been healed yet. If the erosion of such cold power was not removed as soon as possible, losing a right hand would be considered a good outcome. If the cold poison entered the body, his cultivation would be lost, and his body would be worse than that of an ordinary person, turning him into a sickly invalid. If he were a member of a prominent clan or a disciple of a sect who went down the mountain to train, he would have known very well how terrifying such cold poison was. Once infected, he would have tried to get rid of it as soon as possible. However, the man in white only found a pair of gloves and was done with it. He went straight to the lady and bragged about his strength. He even treated Lin Yuan, who he was no match for, as a stepping stone to pursue his sweetheart. That should be the sad thing about the ignorance of low-level cultivators from the Greenwood Forest. As for why he dared to brag like that, it was because he thought that Lin Yuan was doomed that day. With his strength and age, he was barely considered a top fighter among the Greenwood Forest cultivators. However, he was definitely not the main force that came to challenge Lin Yuan today. Even someone at the peak of the airborne realm might have shown up in Jianghu City today to see if Lin Yuan was worthy of the nickname Grim Demon. In the face of such combat strength, Lin Yuan was destined to die, even if he was stronger than the man in white. As long as Lin Yuan was dead, there would be no witnesses. He said that he defeated Lin Yuan with a few punches and kicks. Who would dare to stand up and refute him? The white-clothed man, who was chatting with his sweetheart, did not notice that Lin Yuan, whose face was as cold as ice, had already placed his right hand on the hilt of his saber, silently standing in the path he had to pass. Although he didn't raise his head, his intuition as a cultivator told him that someone was blocking his path. The white-robed man's face suddenly turned ferocious. He turned his head and growled, "Are you King crazy? Haven't you heard that a good dog doesn't block the way? Do you know that I'm—" His voice stopped abruptly. Because he had already turned his head and saw Guan Zhaoshan's delicate face. He suddenly remembered that Lin Yuan had almost split him into 2 halves from his face with the knife. It was still okay when he was facing the saber. After all, at the critical moment of death, other than the fear of death, he was only left with illusions like a merry-go-round lantern. He completely forgot to dodge or beg for mercy, even though he couldn't do one of these 2 things, and even if he did, it wouldn't have any effect. But when Lin Yuan's expression suddenly changed and he broke out of the window, he discovered that he had not died. When he recalled that slash again, an endless sense of fear surged up. Because of this, he returned to the inn he was staying at. After bathing 3 times and changing 2 sets of clothes, he still felt that there was a stench on his body. With great difficulty, he overcame his psychological barrier and accompanied the sweetheart he had always pursued to go shopping. He had originally planned on boasting about his strength and winning the favor of his sweetheart. But when he turned his head, that killing god appeared in front of him again, like an emissary of hell who had forgotten to reap souls and had returned. Lin Yuan did not speak, nor did he draw his saber. He just stared at him with a cold face. In an instant, the legs of the man in white began to tremble. A familiar feeling surged again. A moment later, his sweetheart next to him covered her nose with her hand. Her face revealed an expression of disbelief. However, this was not important. What was important was that the god of death standing in front of him also revealed an undetectable look of disdain. Lin Yuan suddenly did not want to kill this trash. He felt that it would dirty his saber. The killing intent emitted from his body was slightly restrained. The man in white's face suddenly showed joy. He made a prompt decision to grab his sweetheart who was not too far away from him, and then pushed him hard towards Lin Yuan. At the same time he flew back and shouted loudly, "His father is the chief of the Jianghu 36 Road Chain Stockade. He is one of the masters who came to kill you. If you want to kill him, kill him. Don't chase me." "Lin Yuan? Tieske, there's something wrong with this style of yours, brother?" His sweetheart was slightly stunned. Clearly, she did not expect that the bootlicker who had been thinking of ways to please her would not hesitate to wet his pants in the face of danger. Then he pushed her out to block the saber. Then she thought of the purpose of her father's journey from Jianghu to Deer City this time. It seemed to be a crusade against Grim Demon Guan Zhaoshan? Then, this handsome young man with delicate features in front of her was the legendary Grim Demon who was killed by thousands of people in three heavens? Gulp. His sweetheart swallowed a mouthful of saliva and instantly lowered her head. She did not dare to look at Lin Yuan. At the same time she called out in a soft and sweet voice, "Young hero Guan." Good tea. Lin Yuan had goosebumps all over his body. Looking at the cold and indifferent woman who was with the man in white before changing in front of him, he could not help but think of a popular saying in his previous life, "Green tea and a dog will last forever." He seemed to have somehow ruined the relationship between a pair of God's chosen couple. The next moment, Lin Man of Steel Yuan's expression changed slightly. He growled, "Scram?" An ant who had not even stepped into the threshold of cultivation was even worse than the trash who had just escaped. He was not even interested in raising his saber. Such trash wanted to pretend to be a tea master in front of him? What a waste of time. Women will only affect my speed of drawing my saber. Crawl for me. On the other hand, the man in white who pushed his goddess out to block the saber didn't look guilty at all. Instead, he kept increasing his speed and flew in the direction of the red dust inn. The passers-by who were disturbed along the way all greeted him warmly with all kinds of things related to his family tree system, ancestral tombs and feng shui. Grim Demon Guan Zhaoshan was afraid of the Lulin heroes, so he escaped from the Red Dust Inn and hid in Deer City to kill the disciples or descendants of the Lulin heroes who came to kill her. The daughter of the gang leader of Ganyu's 36 Roads chain village was killed by the Grim Demon. He was very satisfied with this script. He even began to imagine the scene of Guan Zhaoshan being attacked by the Lulin heroes and dying tragically. Just thinking about it made him angry. Chapter 784. 10 minutes later, outside the Red Dust Tavern, among the southern Greenwood cultivators who were greeting the shopkeeper and the manservants, a large man with thick eyebrows and a red face suddenly turned his head, just in time to see the white-robed man who was currently flying over. The sharp senses brought about by his cultivation in the airborne realm allowed him to immediately smell the stench of the man in white. He frowned subconsciously and growled, "What's going on, Songjie? Didn't you go to the market in Jianghu City with my daughter? Why did you come back alone? Where's my daughter? Also, why did you King wet your pants?" He asked 3 questions in a row and his voice grew louder and louder. The last 3 words, "wet your pants," immediately attracted the attention of countless cultivators of the forest. It was okay to curse at members of the Red Dust Society at any time, but seeing a rookie with some reputation in the forest wet his pants was not something that could be seen all the time. After yelling, the man with thick eyebrows frowned slightly. *CK I was too careless. Watching a new talent of the Lulin Forest lose face had always been a part of the old senior's repertoire, so he had no qualms about it. However, after shouting, he remembered that this Songjie was his daughter's suitor. Although he had not succeeded, everyone in the southern Lulin Forest knew about him. If this kid lost face, wouldn't he lose face as well? After all, he was considered half a son-in-law. Seeing the group of cultivators of the forest looking at his crotch, Songjie's face turned pale. Whether Guan Zhaoshan died or not, he had been utterly humiliated. In the future he would not be able to hold his head up in the circle of cultivators in the south, let alone in the underworld. He was already decades old and there was nothing wrong with him, yet he still wet his pants in the middle of the street. No matter who it was, they would be immediately killed. But then again, that old thing's daughter was most likely dead anyway, and there was no way he could enter the sect even if he wanted to. The foundation of the Ganyu 36 chain stronghold was definitely not going to be in his hands. He could just find a place to change his face and come back to the underworld. Right now, dealing with Guan Zhaoshan was the most important thing, and there was no need for him to act in a moment of anger. Thinking up to here, Songjie's expression eased up a little and he hissed, "Seniors, you must avenge Miss Zhao. That grim demon is inhumane." He was afraid of Senior's might and didn't dare accept the challenge. He hid in the residences of Jianghu City early in the morning and attempted to sneak an attack on the juniors of Seniors. Miss Zhao and I encountered Grim Demon. If it wasn't for Miss Zhao desperately hugging Grim Demon and buying time, I wouldn't have been able to escape from the jaws of death to inform Seniors. "What? How dare you? Bastard. Kid, quickly lead the way and bring us to find that Grim Demon." The group of southern green forest cultivators didn't suspect anything. After all, they had gone straight to the Red Dust Inn after coming to Deer Chasing City. In the end, they didn't find Guan Zhaoshan at all. Thus, they stood outside the door and started cursing at the members of the Red Dust Society. If he didn't dare to accept the challenge, he should have said so earlier. Now that he had tricked them into coming to Jianghu City without showing himself, wasn't he just toying with them? Only Miss Zhao's father, the burly man with thick eyebrows, frowned. As the saying goes, no one knows a son better than his father. As a father, he was well aware of his daughter's temperament. Like a dragon, like a phoenix, like a phoenix. However, when it came to his daughter, she did not inherit any of the heroic and unrestrained spirit. Instead, she had inherited most of her mother's selfish personality. If she really encountered Grim Demon, his daughter would definitely turn and run. She wouldn't care about Songjia at all. Why would she hug Grim Demon and risk her life to prevent him from chasing after Songjia? This matter was very problematic. Zhao Deyong followed the flow of green forest cultivators. When he passed by Songjia, he said coldly, "You better pray that my daughter isn't dead. Otherwise, no matter what happens to Guan Zhaoshan today, you will pay for my daughter's death with your life." Green forest cultivators had always been like this. They would do as they thought. Other than some established rules or existences with cultivation far stronger than them, they had nothing to fear. Just like now, Zhao Deyong was certain that his daughter's death had something to do with Songjia. Then Songjia must pay for his daughter's death with his life. Because at this moment he was the strong one. Not to mention that Songjia wasn't clean to begin with. Even if Songjia was just an innocent bystander involved in this matter, as long as he was certain that Songjia was related to this matter, he would become a punching bag for him to vent his anger on. At the same time, before the Lulan cultivators walked far, they saw Lin Yuan, who was dressed in white, strolling toward them. The silver-white Guan Shanxue was hung horizontally behind his waist. His temperament was otherworldly, which was completely different from the rough Lulan cultivators. He looked like a character who had walked out of a painting. Zhao Deyong stepped forward and growled, "Guan Zhaoshan, I won't say anything else today. I want you to pay for my daughter's death with your life." As soon as he finished speaking, Zhao Deyong rushed forward and arrived in front of Lin Yuan in a flash within a few breaths. Lin Yuan didn't move at all. He maintained his previous posture and walked forward confidently. It was as if he hadn't reacted yet, or as if he couldn't be bothered with Zhao Deyong. But just because Lin Yuan didn't move, it didn't mean that others didn't. Whoosh whoosh whoosh, sharp sounds of arrows piercing through the air were heard. Zhao Deyong's expression changed. He flipped his hands and slapped away the arrows that were shot at him. "How dare you, Red Dust Society!" Zhao Deyong, who had almost been plotted against, gritted his teeth and growled with a gloomy expression. The shopkeeper, who was also following behind the crowd to watch the show, suddenly changed his expression. He looked around and waved his hands. He kept explaining, "This really wasn't done by us, the Red Dust Society. There are rules in the Jianghu. How could we do something taboo?" It didn't matter if the green forest cultivators believed it or not. They were really wrong to put the blame on the Red Dust Society. Although the matter of Lin Yuan sweeping away the other green forest forces in Jianghu City had angered everyone, no one had the right to say anything publicly. After all, the Red Dust Society followed the green forest rules. Just like this time, if the green forest forces wanted to deal with Lin Yuan, they could only give him a nickname first. Then they could use this method to determine whether Lin Yuan was qualified to carry this nickname. Under such circumstances, Lin Yuan could either not accept the challenge. He would lose face and the Red Dust Society would lose resources. Normally, the Green Forest forces wouldn't allow newcomers to avoid a challenge. After all, they were cultivators that they had nurtured. Even if they were killed, it wouldn't be a big deal. The benefits they had received were real. In comparison, a genius was nothing. On the other hand, an existence like Lin Yuan couldn't be controlled by the Red Dust Society. Their orders were nothing to Lin Yuan. But if Lin Yuan wanted to accept the challenge, they couldn't use any tricks. Chapter 785. The rules of the Jianghu were the same as the laws of the northern frontier. They didn't strictly demand what kind of existence the greenwood cultivators were, but rather, they restrained them. Even if they did evil, they had to have a bottom line. For example, simple rules like, don't implicate family members were there, and very few people would violate them. It didn't mean that someone would come out to punish you for breaking these rules. It was just that since you broke the rules first, it was understandable that others would use the same method to deal with you. Going back and forth, it was bound to implicate some innocent people. If the matter was blown out of proportion, no one would have a good ending. Therefore, the Red Dust faction couldn't break the rules. After all, they were the target of public criticism. Once they angered the public and were accused of breaking the rules of the Jianghu, Even a faction like the Red Dust faction would be destroyed in a day. Bullsh *T. A rather hot-tempered greenwood cultivator cursed, growling. Right now, all of the branches established in Jianghu City have been swept clean. Your Red Dust Society is the most powerful here. There's no way we're plotting against ourselves and pushing the blame onto your Red Dust Society, right? We can't do such a despicable thing. The shopkeeper fell silent for a while. He thought to himself, maybe it's not your fault. After all, it was true that the Red Dust faction had taken over Jianghu City's territory. They were a first-rate faction in the southern Greenwood. Once they occupied Jianghu City for a long time, the gap between them and the other Greenwood factions would widen. Moreover, a genius like Guan Zhaoshan had joined them. To put it bluntly, if Jianghu City was saved, the Red Dust faction would be the leader of the southern Greenwood factions for the next 100 years. Under such circumstances, it was hard to guarantee that there wouldn't be Greenwood factions who didn't want to see the rise of the Red Dust faction use such a despicable method. Have we been in seclusion for so long that you've all forgotten that there's a mountain above us? A slightly feminine male voice sounded. A moment later, a young man with picturesque features, wearing a blue outer garment and a pink inner shirt, slowly appeared in front of the Greenwood cultivators. It has to be said that this enchanting young man is not inferior to Guan Zhaoshan in terms of appearance, but his strange accent and dressing always make people feel that there is a bit of femininity, subconsciously making people want to stay away from him. It is a sharp contrast with the elegant face of Lin Yuan, who was like a celestial in a painting. However, if they looked down on this person because of his appearance, they might not even know how they died. Southerners had a gentler temperament, which was different from Northerners who were unyielding and domineering. Even ordinary people were much wealthier than the people of the northern region in the past, so there were many busybodies in the southern region. There were all kinds of lists that listed heavenly talents and powerful people, such as the Green Cloud roll that recorded the young talents, the Hidden Dragon roll that recorded the hidden experts, and so on. The monthly update of the list was a lucrative industry in the southern region. A thin booklet, if placed in the secular world, would be worth at least 5 taels of silver. As for the list that had substance and introduced the characteristics, strengths, and weaknesses of various cultivators, there was a huge market in the cultivation world. Many southern cultivators fought for a place on the lists. Of course, the Greenwood faction in the south also had a list. It was called the Night Thieves Ranking, which listed the top 10,000 experts of the dark forces in the south. In addition to the various false and real introductions, it also recorded the rewards of each person. The difference between the top and bottom of the list was not based on strength but the reward. It was similar to the wanted posters of pirates in the 3 popular manga in Lin Yuan's previous life. No one knew the name of this enchanting young man, but he was a playboy by nature and attracted both men and women. He had the nickname Lianhua. Like the Lianhua child in Lin Yuan's previous life, he was also proficient in all kinds of miscellaneous studies. However, his talent for learning everything was extremely terrifying. However, the difference in personality was completely different. The Lianhua child of the Jianghu continent was very seductive. He was ranked 1357 on the Night Thieves ranking. Don't think that this ranking was low. The number of southern cultivators of the Greenwood faction in the Shenwu dynasty was innumerable. Currently, there were at least 50 to 60 million of them. At their peak, they could even suppress the local authorities of the south and start a massacre in broad daylight. Not to mention, the Night Thieves ranking did not only include the Greenwood faction in the south. It included all kinds of people from the dark side. That Taoist Red Dust, who could suppress the other Greenwood faction, did not even have the qualifications to be on the list. For Lianhua to be able to be ranked in the top 1,500 out of 10,000 people, it could be seen how fierce his reputation was in the south. It's time to teach them a lesson. In a tea house by the street, a pair of twin brothers who were playing chess suddenly popped their heads out and echoed with a smile. The 2 brothers, Double Blade, Lu Qian and Lu Ming, who were ranked 1417 on the Night Thieves ranking, were born as conjoined twins. Later on, they were separated into 2 independent individuals by an expert. However, their minds were connected and they were extremely adept at joint attacks. The battle that made the 2 brothers famous was when they worked together to kill a cultivator in the middle stage of the airborne realm when they were still in the late stage of the mortal evolution realm. Now, the 2 brothers were already at the peak stage of the airborne realm. If they worked together, they might not be able to defeat a Heavenly Dipper realm cultivator, but it was more than enough for them to stall such a powerful person for a while and retreat safely. There were 3 people in a row, and all of them were famous people on the Night Thieves ranking. Clearly, such people were not people that the Red Dust faction could invite. This Guan Zhaoshan, Who exactly was he? Many of the forest cultivators who were invited to help narrowed their eyes slightly. Their little abacus quickly pounded in their hearts, and they began to calculate the gains and losses. For the sake of this so-called friendship, was it really worth it to offend Guan Zhaoshan, a rising star who was destined to soar, and to offend 3 people who could be ranked in the top 1,500 of the Night Thieves ranking? This debt was not difficult to calculate. The moment Lian Hua and the others appeared, many forest cultivators had quietly left the group and hid in the shops on the street, pretending to be onlookers. Soon, more and more people came to their senses. There was no special relationship between Lian Hua and Double Blade. The two of them were even active in different areas in the male side. There was no interaction at all. However, at this moment, the fact that these 3 ruthless people had appeared at the same time to support Guan Zhaoshan was right there. Naturally, there was no need to say what this meant. There was a behemoth standing behind Guan Zhaoshan at the moment. At the very least, it was a behemoth that the airborne realm cultivators of the forest were unable to shake. Even if they were to break the rules, the fighters behind them would not have dared to say anything. This was because in the south, there was only one force that could gather 3 people on the Night Thieves ranking. The Ether Society. Chapter 786. The Red Dust Society was definitely at the top of the southern Greenwood Circle. The Red Dust Society, who was a half-step Kongming cultivator, had the power to challenge second-rate clans and sections. With such a power, even if there were new members of the Greenwood Society who wanted to find a backer, they would first consider the Red Dust Society, not the other Greenwood gangs. It was like a young man with potential who wanted to cultivate. If he had the ability, he would choose to join a well-known and powerful sect. As long as there was a choice, they would not choose to join those sects that were not as powerful. However, the Red Dust Society was only at the top of the Greenwood Society. In a one-on-one fight, they were stronger than other Greenwood forces, but they were not so strong that they made everyone despair. The general structure of the Southern Greenwood Society was similar to that of Jianghu City. Every clan had their own territory, and there were even grudges between the leaders. Overall, the other Greenwood forces were all potential allies when facing the Red Dust Society. The Southern Greenwood Society wanted to suppress the Red Dust Society. That was why Guan Zhaoshan made such a big fuss when he came out. That was because the Red Dust Society was already strong enough, and the other Greenwood forces did not want the Red Dust Society to become even stronger. Most of the cultivators who were willing to be bound by rules and discipline went to sects or the government. Only those who liked to be free and unrestrained would fall to the dark side of the world, who would want to have a leader above them. However, the Red Dust Society had previously suppressed the Southern Greenwood Society, and Guan Zhaoshan had risen from nothing. Although it was not said explicitly, the current Red Dust Society had shown the momentum and ambition of swallowing the South. If they did not stop it, the Red Dust Society would definitely become the leader. It was not something they wanted to do at all. The Red Dust Society, who was a half-step Kongming cultivator before he went into seclusion, was easy to find, and there were certainly not many who were reckless enough to try to challenge him. Guan Zhaoshan, who was at most in the airborne realm, was undoubtedly the best target. Killing Guan Zhaoshan was equivalent to killing the Red Dust Society's chances of becoming stronger in the future. Who would have thought that Guan Zhaoshan would have something to do with the Ether Society? What level of power was the Ether? The Ether Society was an organization jointly established by the underworld forces of the Jianghu dynasty in the past. Even assassin organizations like the Sword Dancer and the Shadow Walker, which stood above the clouds, had a cooperative relationship with the Ether Society. It was not appropriate to call them vassals, but the Ether Society was definitely their biggest bounty mission provider. For assassin organizations like this that worked for money, as long as they could afford the price, they could even call the Ether Society daddy. 8 out of 10 of the other dark influences that had not reached the level of these 2 great assassin organizations were the minions of the Ether Society. To the Ether Society of the past, a mere circle of the southern forest was just an ant that could be wiped out with a flip of their hand. Recently, the Ether Association had not been having a good time. Their northern branch had been wiped out by the Demon the Arch Association, while their branch in the Central Plains had been wiped out by the Jianghu dynasty and the Sky Demon. After suffering heavy losses, they could only retreat to the south to recuperate. But as the saying went, the tiger's might was still there even after its death. Putting aside the fact that the ferocious tiger, the Ether Society, was only heavily injured and was not on the verge of death, even if it had reached that stage, those interest groups in the south could not do anything about it. In troubled times they could only survive in the cracks. To an organization like the Ether Society, the interest groups in the south did not even have the right to touch them. After merging with the remnants of the Central Plains, the Ether Society's power in the south had risen to another level. It was also one of the few first-rate influences that could compete with the demon sect, and was also willing to do so. If not for the intervention of these first-rate influences, the South might have completely fallen into the hands of the demon sect. And now the Ether Society was standing on Guan Zhaoshan's side. Did that mean that the Ether Society wanted to recruit Guan Zhaoshan, or even absorb the entire Red Dust Society? To the Southern Forest this was not good news. The Red Dust Society was a power that they could only contend against if they joined forces. If they were to join the Ether Society, how would they survive in the future? Would they really respect the Red Dust Society as their leader? Lin Yuan slowly released his right hand from the hilt of his blade. He turned his head and glanced at Lian Hua, who was following behind him. A hint of confusion flashed in his heterochromatic eyes. He said in a deep voice, "I don't seem to have contacted you. Then, who gave you the courage to meddle in my business?" Lian Hua did not respond to Lin Yuan's words. However, a series of gasps could be heard from all around them. Putting aside the fact that Lian Hua had the backing of the Ether Society, just her ranking on the thieves' chart was enough to make the cultivators in the south tremble in fear. This Guan Zhaoshan actually dared to use such a tone to question Lian Hua? Where did she come from? We've come on the president's orders. If you have anything you need to do in the south, you can tell us directly. Lian Hua narrowed her peach blossom eyes and smiled at Lin Yuan in a fawning manner. She did not expose Lin Yuan's identity because this was an order personally given by the president. However, this did not mean that they did not know what kind of terrifying existence lay beneath Guan Zhaoshan's skin. The Ether Society? The thieves' chart? They were all trash. Even if those in the top 10 of the thieves' chart were to come, they would only have the right to bow and bend their knees before this person. But you've disrupted my plans. Lin Yuan's eyes narrowed. Guan Shanxue whizzed out from his waist. In an instant, the blade was placed on Lian Hua's shoulder. The cold blade pressed against Lian Hua's fair neck. He only needed to use a little more force and this valuable head would fall to the ground. In the face of the threat of death, Lian Hua still maintained a calm expression. She said indifferently, "The president has already instructed us to do this in advance. Therefore when we came we prepared a gift for you. In addition, the president asked me to tell you that the situation over there is not good. If you want to do something, it's not appropriate to slowly lay out your plans." As soon as she finished speaking, two cultivators in long gray robes appeared from the other end of the street. They each held a metal chain and led two humanoid creatures with disheveled hair. They slowly approached. "Is that the Flying Star sect's eldest senior brother? I heard that he's a little genius. He's only 60 years old and he's already at the threshold of advancing to the Heaven Star border. As long as he takes that step, he'll be a top figure in the entire South. Why is he being led around like a dog?" A sharp-eyed cultivator pointed at one of the two humanoid creatures and exclaimed in disbelief. "Flying Star sect's eldest senior brother? Oh, what kind of genius is that? Look at the one beside him. That's a real ruthless person. Back then, he single-handedly overturned the 72 strongholds of the Black Cloud Mountain. After returning to the sect, he went into seclusion for 30 years. Then he leaped over the Dragon Gate and advanced to the Heaven Star border. He's known as the Flying Star sect's first sword saint, Elder Lu Fangji." Soon, another voice rang out and called out the name of the other humanoid creature. Chapter 787. The reason why they were called humanoid creatures was because their current appearances were truly unsightly. Their robes were tattered and there were dark brown bloodstains everywhere. Their hair was disheveled, and their faces were sallow and emaciated. If not for the fact that their facial features could still be seen, they probably would not have been recognized. However, before the Ether Association brought them out, they must have specially washed their faces so that others would recognize them and use this to humiliate the Flying Star sect. The two of them relied entirely on their knees, waist, and elbows to barely crawl and keep up with the two Ether Association members who were holding the metal chains in front of them. This was because the tendons in their arms and legs had been cut. In addition to the injuries on their bodies, even if they still had their cultivation, they could only barely suppress their injuries. They could not even walk or fly. Describing them as dogs on a leash was the most apt way to describe their current state. This should have been specially processed by someone to achieve this effect. However, the people around them started discussing again. "This is not right. Isn't this Guan Zhaoshan the eldest daughter of the first wife of the Guan family? Before this, I've never even heard of her being a cultivator. If Guan Zhaoshan has always been related to the Ether Association, then no matter how daring the Flying Star sect was, they would not have directly killed the Guan family, right? Yes. Yes. But speaking of which, this Guan Zhaoshan looks really good. She looks like a fairy from a painting. Do you think she has that kind of relationship with the elusive president of the Ether Association? Slap. You dare to F***king hit me? So what if I hit you? If you want to die, don't drag us down with you. That's right. The Ether Association is a first-rate faction. Grassroots like you and I would not even know how we died if we talked about their president. So what if he hit you? I want to kill you too. The surroundings were in an uproar. This group of Greenwood cultivators basically couldn't say anything nice. However, they quickly realized that a faction at the level of the Ether Association wasn't something they could discuss. Moreover, an existence at the level of the Ether Association's president couldn't do something like offend a quasi-first-rate sect to death for a woman. This Guan Zhaoshan was also not someone they could discuss. Lian Hua frowned slightly and secretly memorized a few faces. Then she said in a flattering tone, "Our people have already surrounded the Flying Star sect's mountain gate. Their disciples who went out to do business have all been captured by us. As long as you give the order now, the Flying Star sect will immediately be wiped out." As soon as he finished speaking, the surrounding noise abruptly stopped. They were merely curious about Guan Zhaoshan's background. After all, he had led the Flying Star sect's eldest senior brother and an elder who was known as the Sword Saint through the streets like dogs. His actions had greatly offended the Flying Star sect. But now, good heavens, they're good heavens. This time, the Ether Society was no longer trying to save face for the Flying Star sect. They were trying to wipe out the entire Flying Star sect. Alright, I got it. You can leave now. If there's anything, I'll summon you. Lin Yuan waved his hand lightly and did not say anything else. He moved Guan Shanxue away from Lian Hua's shoulder and walked toward the Flying Star sect's eldest senior brother and the Sword Saint elder who were crawling over like dogs. Although the development of the situation was not what he had expected. However, there was nothing he could do about it. When Li Zhong had rejected Zhang Xiu and his subordinates, Lin Yuan had sent Zhang Xiu to the south. Firstly, he wanted to set up a trap in the south. Secondly, he wanted to use Zhang Xiu's resentment to cooperate with the demon sect to give Lei Qiuxing a ruthless blow. However, he did not expect Lei Qiuxing to self-destruct so quickly. He had no reason to summon Zhang Xiu back, so he could only let him continue to develop freely in the south. However, no matter what flowed in Zhang Xiu's body was not blood, but the poison of the curse he had planted. He could control Zhang Xiu's life and death at any time, so Zhang Xiu could naturally sense his presence. Zhang Xiu had probably already sensed his presence when he had just descended into Guan Zhaoshan's body. However, he had not been able to find out who he was. Today, because of the summoning of his divine sense clone, he had used a safe house to temporarily hide. Naturally, he could not escape the eyes of the embroidered guards. The Ether Society had also heard the news and acted immediately. Mississippi. Miss Guan, I beg you, let me go. I was just blinded by greed for a moment. As long as you let me go, I'm willing to change. I can be your dog. When he walked up to the two of them, the Flying Star sect's eldest senior brother looked unusually excited, as if he had seen his savior. It was obvious that the two of them did not have a good time in the hands of the Ether Society. Come to think of it, after all, those who could join the Ether Society were all outstanding figures in the world of darkness. There were countless perverts, lunatics, and mental patients. It would be strange if they could still be treated well after falling into the hands of this group of people. In order to curry favor with Lin Yuan, the Ether Society would torture them in every possible way, but would not let them die. In the short time that they had been captured and sent to Jianghu City, they had probably suffered inhumane torture no less than 10 times. Every time they were rescued, it would be another round of miserable reincarnation. Look at yourself. What do you think you are? Show me your aura. You are the chief disciple of the Flying Star sect. You represent the Flying Star sect. Isn't it just death? I don't believe that the dogs hit Ether Society would dare to destroy the Flying Star sect and become enemies with all the sects in the south. It's just a mere first-rate faction. Even if they are more powerful, Compared to the Flying Star sect's eldest senior brother, the Sword Saint elder's attitude was obviously colder. However, before he could finish his words, he stopped abruptly. Because Lin Yuan, who had bent down to face him, smiled faintly at him. Then, the dragon's might that had been compressed to the extreme exploded in the Sword Saint Elder's mind like a single-target spiritual attack. Although he was in the Heaven Star border realm, he had just stepped into it not long ago. He was only at the first level of the Heaven Star border realm. When he was in his peak state, he could easily crush Lin Yuan in a one-on-one battle, let alone in a spiritual battle. What he was facing was not just a level 8 Mountain Lord demonic beast, but an ancient god-level existence. PFFF. The Sword Saint Elder opened his mouth, as if he wanted to expose Lin Yuan's identity as not a human. After all, aura could be concealed, but once it was leaked, it would not be able to fool others. As someone who grew up in the cultivation world in the south, how could he not tell that the aura just now belonged to a dragon bloodline demonic beast? Chapter 788. However, before the Sword Saint Elder could finish his words, a silver-white long saber had already crushed his heart. Congratulations, host. You have killed a Heaven Star Realm Level 1 cultivator. You have gained 200 attribute points. The Southern Sects. That sounds impressive. I wonder how many sects will dare to raise their heads when this king's army comes down south. Lin Yuan's voice rang out slowly. It sounded like two pieces of jade colliding, crisp and pleasing to the ears. However, in the ears of the Flying Star sect's eldest disciple, no matter how pleasant the words were, it was enough to send chills down his spine. This king? Army coming down south? Looking down on the sects. When these characteristics were put together, there was only one person in the entire Jianghu continent who could match up to them. The god of the northern frontier, the Black Water Dragon King Lin Yuan. She was not Guan Zhaoshan but Lin Yuan. No wonder his cultivation had improved by leaps and bounds. No wonder he had such a precious treasure. No wonder he could order the Red Dust Association around. No wonder he could cause the Ether Association, which had always been hidden in the dark, to come out. No wonder he could make someone like Lian Hua use a fawning tone. All the questions were answered at this moment. Fame was such a strange thing. When disaster befell, only those who were crowned as heroes would light up the hope of mankind. Guan Zhaoshan was a mystery that puzzled the entire southern cultivation world, but when it came to Lin Yuan, it would only make people feel that it was a matter of course. You just said that you're willing to be my dog? Lin Yuan pulled Guan Shanxue out of the Sword Saint Elder's chest and slowly squatted down in front of the Flying Star sect's eldest disciple. Yes, I'm very willing to serve you. The Flying Star sect's eldest disciple hurriedly nodded with a fervent look in his eyes. Obviously, he didn't understand what it meant to have a deity descend. He also didn't know that after a deity took over a body, they had to fulfill the last wish of the previous owner of the body. He also didn't know that the girl named Guan Zhaoshan hated him to the core. However, this was not important to the Flying Star sect's eldest senior brother because they used to belong to the Jianghu dynasty. Now that the Jianghu dynasty had been destroyed, according to the rules of the Jianghu continent, the 7 empires would always be the 7 empires. The other empires were not allowed to occupy the territory of the Jianghu dynasty. They could only withdraw their troops and coldly watch as the land was filled with war until a new ruler was chosen and the 7th empire was established. However, looking at the former territories of the Jianghu dynasty, the Central Plains had the Sky Demon and the South had the Demon Sect wreaking havoc. There was no one who was qualified to compete with the northern frontier. The 7th dynasty had already been decided. Could be said that Lin Yuan was a golden thigh. In addition, Lin Yuan's identity as a demonic beast made him unable to rule the human territory. He could only be the king behind the scenes. A suitable puppet had to be nurtured. However, once a puppet had been nurtured for a long time and cultivated its own strength, whether or not it was still a puppet was not up to Lin Yuan, the demonic beast, to decide. If Lin Yuan raised his arm and called for help, there would definitely be a swarm of followers. To the Flying Star sect's eldest senior brother, this was a huge opportunity that had fallen right in front of him. If he could gain the favor of Lin Yuan, he would rather not be the Flying Star sect's eldest senior brother. I do like to raise dogs, but I don't like useless dogs. Unfortunately, with your character, you are not even qualified to be my dog. In addition, your abilities in all aspects are not enough for me to tolerate the flaws in your character. As soon as he finished speaking, the expression on the Flying Star sect's eldest senior brother's face instantly froze. The fanaticism in his eyes gradually subsided, and he revealed a panicked look. He opened his mouth to beg for mercy, but could only make ba-ba-ba-ba sounds and miserable howls. With a flash of silver light, Lin Yuan threw away the half of his tongue that was stuck on Guan Shanxue. He immediately sheathed his saber and said in a joking tone, "Your current expression is so perfect. I think that a piece of trash like you who likes to treat others as cultivation furnaces should have seen this expression many times. It's either from the faces of those young girls or from the faces of their family members who want to protect them. You may have been numb to it, right? But have you ever thought that one day, you would show this kind of expression to someone stronger than you?" The Flying Star Sect's eldest senior brother's expression was still distorted, but his eyes were slightly focused. What kind of joke was this? A demonic beast, a mere demonic beast who would be called an evil creature if he walked out of the Hungduan mountain range, was actually lecturing him here? What do you think you are? A messenger of justice? I'm indeed not a messenger of justice. I'm just someone who was entrusted by someone. The face that used to belong to Guan Zhaoxin squeezed out a touch of bitterness. He murmured, "I thought that after being a demonic beast for a few years, I could be indifferent to everything. After coming to the south, I realized that I was wrong. I'm just used to the law of the jungle in this world. The phrase, human life is precious, has become a joke in my mind. But I'm used to the rules of my previous life. Although I haven't become a saint, I still get angry when I see scum like you." The Flying Star Sect's eldest senior brother didn't understand Lin Yuan's strange words. In fact, Lin Yuan wasn't saying it for him to hear. He was just expressing his feelings. Because he had just untied a knot in his heart. Was he still a human? In terms of his form of existence, Lin Yuan definitely couldn't be considered a human. But after all, he still had more than 20 years of his previous life stored in the depths of his soul. When he first came to this world, he also considered himself a human. But later he really couldn't blend into the circle of human beings, so he started to become violent and domineering. When he first came to this world, he was also a guy who was willing to fight a cultivator in order to protect a human girl he didn't know. Although the result was that he brought a lot of trouble to himself, Lin Yuan didn't have much regret at that time. What he did later was just a protective camouflage produced by his biological instincts. His ego still thought that he was a human being. That was enough. Didn't what he did unconsciously reflect that? He wanted to break the shackles of the feudal dynasty and establish a new law in the northern frontier. He wanted to let ordinary people live a full life. He wanted to create a world where humans and demonic beasts could coexist. This was a knot in his heart. Today, after seeing the real scum, he would still be angry for no reason. He would still miss the prosperous and beautiful world of his previous life. He would still miss the time he spent with his family as a human. How should he put it? It was great that he didn't become a monster. The bitterness on his face gradually turned into a relieved smile. Lin Yuan slowly lifted Guan Shanxue up and said with a smile, "However, the existence of scum like you has made me more determined to clean up the remnants of the feudal system. This should be the greatest contribution you've made as a human being, right?" Chapter 789. As the blade fell, the memories that had been hidden by his original body surfaced one by one. The injury on his right hand had also obviously healed. Back then, Lin Yuan could not recall them no matter how hard he tried. This was because of one of the rules of the Descent of Gods. The original body would only give out the conditions for completing the mission, but not the details. Only by killing the person who deserved to die would the relevant memories be unlocked. He had thought that the Guan clan had protected his original body too well, but this was obviously a huge mistake. All the love, hate, gratitude and grudges in this world could not be without reason. The system did not give out any missions because it could not interfere with such rules. After carefully recalling what the Flying Star Sect's eldest senior brother had said to his original body, as well as what the Flying Star Sect had done in joining forces with Lei Qiuming to destroy the Guan clan, Lin Yuan's eyes flashed with a hint of ruthlessness. "Congratulations, host, for killing a level 10 Zephyr Realm cultivator. You have gained 20 attribute points." The system's notification rang out, waking Lin Yuan from his memories. It did not allow him to be affected by his original body's emotions. The members of the Ether Society had all gone into hiding. Those Greenwoods cultivators who had come out of admiration had also mostly dispersed by now. He even dared to kill the chief disciple and elder of the Flying Star Sect. With the Ether Society backing him up, what was the difference between killing them and squashing ants? Those who remained were Song Jie, who was scared out of his wits, Zhao Deong, who was in a daze, and the Red Dustin's shopkeeper and a group of servants. After sheathing Guan Shanxue, who was still untainted by blood, Lin Yuan turned around and said in a deep voice, "Continue with what you promised me. If you do it well, the Red Dust Society will be the leader of the Greenwoods in the south." "That's what I said." Yes, sir. The shopkeeper and the servants all knelt on the ground. Why was the Red Dust Society willing to work for Lin Yuan? Was it really just because they wanted the profits from Jianghu City? Of course not. Although Jianghu City was a second-tier city in the south, it was only a better place to stay and a source of income for the Red Dust Guild. Whether it was there or not, it wouldn't make much of a difference. They worked for Lin Yuan because they were optimistic about Lin Yuan's future. They hoped that after Lin Yuan established the 7th dynasty in the future, the Red Dust Society's strength would not be further improved, but at least their heritage would not be cut off. However, a potential investment was a potential investment. No one would reject an immediate benefit. Jianghu City was nothing. If they wanted it, they could just grit their teeth and fight for it. However, right now, Lin Yuan was able to directly control the Ether Association and make such a promise. What did this mean? From today onwards, the Red Dust Society would be directly labeled as the Ether Society. Disregarding the distribution of benefits from today onwards, no one would dare to say no to the Red Dust Society's matters. Even a first-rate faction might not want to try and see if they could withstand the Ether Society's wrath. As for you, Lin Yuan walked to Zhao Deyang's side and said expressionlessly, "Your daughter hasn't even stepped through the threshold of cultivation. My blade has no interest in the blood of weaklings." Zhao Deyang's body trembled. The dazed look in his eyes slowly faded away and was replaced by a touch of joy. After 3 breaths, he knelt on the ground and slammed his forehead on the ground, shattering the tiles. At the same time he roared loudly, "From today onwards, the Jianghu 36 Road Chain Stockade will follow Miss Guan's lead." While he was one of the few fighters in the southern Greenwoods, he knew very well that his aptitude was limited. Otherwise he wouldn't have been rejected when he wanted to join a sect back then. Being able to reach the peak of the airborne realm was already the limit of what he could achieve in this lifetime. To him, going further was an extravagant hope. Being able to achieve what he had at that moment was already his limit. He might be a little shameless, but that did not stop him from wanting to rely on Guan Zhaoshan. If he could get her protection, the Jianghu 36 Roads Chain Stockade Village might not be able to become the boss of the southern Green Forest like the Red Dust Gang, but it would definitely be one of the top forces. It could be said that he had found a great backer for his daughter and those old brothers who worked together with her. Originally, it was because of the grudge of killing his daughter, but now that he knew that his daughter was not dead, Zhao Deyang naturally did not think so much. Lin Yuan was speechless. He paused his steps and turned his head to look at Zhao Deyang, whose forehead was on the ground. "Good guy, I'm F***king good guy. You don't have any psychological barriers at all when it comes to taking advantage of the situation?" After thinking for a moment, Lin Yuan raised his right hand and said expressionlessly, "Got it. Go back and gather your men. I'll be making a big move soon. Whether or not you can fight for a future depends on whether you're willing to put your life on the line." "Yes." Zhao Deyang's voice was as loud as a bell. He got up and strode away with a smile on his face. It was not until Lin Yuan walked in front of him that Song Jie, who was scared out of his wits, reacted. Before Lin Yuan could say anything, he knelt on the ground and said with a hoarse voice, I also." He had only wanted to use the Greenwood cultivators to kill Guan Zhaoshan. After getting his revenge, he would change his face and go out into the world with a new identity. With his looks and cultivation, it was only a matter of time before he made a name for himself. But now, not only was Guan Zhaoshan alive, but she was also involved with the Ether Society. A Greenwood cultivator like him knew very well what level of existence the Ether Society was. Let alone changing his appearance and identity, even if he changed his appearance, the Ether Society would be able to easily find him. If Guan Zhaoshan insisted on killing him, he would not even be able to walk out of Jianghu City. BFFT. Song Jie's head fell to the ground as soon as the sound was heard. Congratulations to the host for killing a level 6 airborne realm cultivator. 8 attribute points gained. Do you think you have what it takes to be a dog? Lin Yuan's voice was heard indifferently. At the next moment, his tone turned cold as he hissed, "It's one thing for you to be shameless and distort the truth, but at the moment of life and death, you even use the woman you like to take the hit. Trash like you has no need to live. Furthermore, people who think they are smart don't end up well. From all aspects, you're worse than that scum from before. Who gave you the courage to be my dog?" He sheathed his blade and walked toward the Red Dust Inn. Because of the Ether Society's involvement, there was a slight change in the plan. While he had killed those who needed to be killed, it was still not enough. The attribute points he had accumulated were not enough for him to break through to the next level. However, the situation at the northern frontier was not looking good, and he needed to speed up. There was no need to rush things in the south anyway. Chapter 790. 2 days later. In the southern capital of the Jianghu dynasty, Chuha City. A figure covered in pitch-black armor sat in the courtyard. He raised his head and stared at the gigantic and demonic cherry blossom tree in front of him. He held a white porcelain wine flask and a wine cup in each hand as he poured himself a drink. However, no one saw that when he opened his mouth to drink, a pitch-black snake's tongue quietly flicked out from his mouth. President, the Dragon King's identity has been confirmed. It's just that, Lian Hua, who had met Lin Yuan once in Jianghu City, was currently kneeling on one knee behind the black-armored man. She had retracted all of her demonic aura and her handsome face was filled with hesitation. It's not up to you or me to tell Lord Dragon King what to do. Although I've disrupted the Dragon King's plans by sending all of you to Jianghu City, it's also a form of goodwill. When it's time to use us, the Dragon King will naturally speak. If you wish to continue stirring things up behind my back, you can give it a try. Let's see if there's anyone in the entire south who can protect you. The black-armored man's back was facing Lian Hua. His tone did not fluctuate at all, but he changed the topic and said indifferently, "However, I understand your intentions. Later, make a copy of the information on the demon cult that the various branches have sorted out and send it to the Dragon King." "You're saying?" The expression on Lian Hua's face changed slightly. Before she could finish her sentence, she clenched her teeth and did not finish her sentence. Regardless of whether it was this president who controlled the entire situation or the Dragon King who dominated the northern frontier, their words and actions were not things that a mere member of the Ether Society like her could control. There were some things that she should be clear about. Doing unnecessary things and saying unnecessary words would only bring about a fatal disaster to oneself. After Lian Hua bowed and left, the black-armored man slowly got up and walked to the cherry blossom tree with his hands behind his back. His voice was suffocatingly cold. "Lin Yuan, what exactly are you thinking about? First-rate wise people like to start from the overall situation and place their chess pieces. Only ignorant people will pay attention to the immediate interests. For the existence of Lin Yuan's character, the Hongqian society is just a chess piece. When it is used at the right time, it should be regarded as an abandoned chess piece and abandoned directly. But now Lin Yuan had publicly declared that he wanted the Red Dust Society to be branded as the Ether Society. He even wanted to hand over the entire southern forest to the Red Dust Society in the future. This meant that this chess piece still had value that could be exploited. Was it to gather the forces of the southern forest to fight against the devil cult? No, that was obviously impossible. The size of the Ether Society was obvious. Even if the demon sect had the Sky Demon behind them, they would not be able to threaten the Ether Society. If the Sky Demon mobilized a large number of people to the south to encircle and annihilate the Ether Association, the northern frontier would naturally also send troops to invade the Central Plains. However, if both sides disregarded the northern frontier, the demon sect's strength alone would at most be on par with the Ether Association. Not to mention, the various cultivation sects under the Heavenly Gate Guardians were also carrying out operations against the demon sect members. From the perspective of the big picture, although the demon sect was constantly encroaching on the south, it was only targeting the interest groups in the south led by Lei Qiuming. The first-rate sects and aristocratic families had actually been suppressing the demon sect all along. If Lin Yuan wanted to gather the forces of the south to fight against the demon sect, it would only take a word, and the Ether Association would immediately take action. At that time, not just the southern forest, but the entire dark world in the south would have to fight for Lin Yuan. Knock, knock. The black-armored man reached out and lightly knocked twice on the cherry blossom tree. "What's the matter?" A somewhat languid voice sounded from above. Unknowingly, a slender figure dressed in black had crossed his arms in front of his chest and squinted his eyes as he leaned against the trunk of the cherry blossom tree. The branches under his feet did not move at all, as if this black-armored man had no weight at all. The black-armored man's facial features were ordinary, but he had a different kind of aura. He clearly looked no different from an ordinary person, but as long as you turned your head and did not look at him, you would completely forget what this face looked like in just 2 or 3 breaths. The 81st place on the Night Thieves leaderboard, Latent Shadow, Qin Ping. If he brought this head to the government to exchange for a bounty, he would have the resources to cultivate all the way to the Tiangang realm from an ordinary person's foundation. However, it was not as if there were no cases of bounty hunters killing or capturing the top 100 on the Night Thieves leaderboard. Even the top of the leaderboard had changed 3 times, but Qin Ping was still able to sit firmly in the 81st place. It could be seen that his methods were extraordinary. Have your people infiltrate the Red Dust Society. I want to know all the secrets of this organization in the shortest time possible. The black-armored man slowly withdrew his right hand. His tone was still gloomy and cold. Qin Ping pondered for a moment. Still squinting his eyes, he said in a languid tone, "There's nothing to investigate. The Red Dust Society is now in decline. Other than having a long inheritance, there's nothing worth paying attention to." If you look back 2,000 years ago, the Red Dust Society would be the strongest cultivation sect in this area. As for now, inheritance, long ago? The black-armored man was slightly startled. The dark green vertical pupils under the visor suddenly condensed as he gently chewed on these 4 words. Yes, I've looked through all the ancient books of the Red Dust Society. According to the stories passed down orally or recorded internally 2,000 years ago, no, even longer ago, the Red Dust Society should be called the God Sculpting Sect. They cultivated cultivation methods from another world. More than one supreme realm expert had appeared in their sect. It is said that one of them was an amazing genius who touched the threshold of a higher realm. However, I've studied the cultivation methods and secret techniques of the Red Dust Society. Although many of them are different from the cultivation methods of other sects, it's a bit of a stretch to call them cultivation methods from another world. Moreover, most of the contents are messy and useless. If one cultivates according to the Red Dust Society's cultivation methods, half-step Kongming realm would be the limit. That Red Dust Taoist must have gone into seclusion because of the limitations of his cultivation method. However, there is another saying within the Red Dust Assembly. Their original cultivation method indeed came from another world, but with the passage of time, the laws of heaven and earth began to change, and some of the subtle and profound aspects could no longer be cultivated. Forcibly cultivating them would only lead to cultivation deviation. Therefore, with the efforts of generations of disciples, the Red Dust Assembly's cultivation method, soul sculpting art, was modified into the current Red Dust Scripture, an earth-step high-rank cultivation method. Qin Ping's tone was still languid, but with such a detailed description, it was obvious that when Qin Ping sneaked into the Red Dust Society to investigate this matter, his interest was also extremely high. God Sculpting Sect, God Sculpting Method. More than 2,000 years ago, what happened? The black-armored man raised his head and stared at Qin Ping, puzzled. This matter, the Red Dust Society should also have records, otherwise they wouldn't have changed their cultivation methods without any basis, right? Chapter 791. The rise of the God Sculpting Sect was due to that amazing genius who touched the threshold of the sovereign realm. Even if he hadn't broken through at that time, his strength could be said to be invincible in the sovereign realm. Now that we know of the Heavenly Gate's guardians, there are many who were defeated by him in the past. However, the decline of the God Sculpting Sect was also because of that amazing genius. After he defeated all the masters in the world, he suddenly said that, "The peak of the supremacy realm is not my fault." He also said to the higher-ups of the God Sculpting Sect that the God Sculpting technique they cultivated had a huge flaw. Therefore, even if they reached the end of this path, they would only reach the peak of the supremacy realm. After saying this, that genius went to the gate of heaven, saying that he wanted to find the source of the God Sculpting technique. He wanted to ask the existence who passed down this cultivation method, why he was not willing to pass down the complete cultivation method, and what was the missing part. Since then, that genius had never returned and there was no longer any news of him. 400 years later, the God Sculpting Sect, which had lost the genius, but was still able to maintain its position as a first-rate force in the Sky Martial continent, suddenly held a funeral for an unknown person, causing the entire Sky Martial continent to know about it. Not long after, many people speculated that the genius who entered the gate of heaven to find the source of the cultivation method had fallen somewhere unknown. Therefore, the world fell into chaos, and those who had enmity with the God Sculpting Sect and coveted their resources all emerged. After a war that lasted for more than 130 years, the God Sculpting Sect was destroyed. The various assets under their name were divided among the various cultivation sects, and most of the ancient books and cultivation method collections were plundered. However, the disciples did not die, and had always been operating in the dark in the Sky Martial continent until more than 100 years ago, when the Red Dust Taoist appeared. He suppressed the other Lulan forces and single-handedly created the Red Dust Assembly. It's just that, the current Red Dust Assembly is too weak, and their secret cultivation method is only SOSO. Those who had enmity with the God Sculpting Sect have either been annihilated in the long river of history, or have become the gate of heaven's guardians. They have been too lazy to deal with the remnants of the god sculpting sect. Of course, the reason why I know so much is because someone entrusted me to investigate the Red Dust Assembly. However, the other party felt that the Red Dust Assembly was not a threat, so they gave up. Otherwise, if you came looking for me today, I would have to go to the Red Dust Assembly to investigate this information. It may not be as detailed as the original investigation. Qin Ping's tone contained a bit of sadness, as if he was lamenting the fate of the god sculpting sect. So that's how it is. I understand now. The black-armored man's expression changed as he gritted his teeth and muttered. After hearing these secrets from Qin Ping, he finally figured out why Lin Yuan would treat the Red Dust Society, which had been reduced to messing around in the southern forest, differently. What came from the other world wasn't just the cultivation methods passed down by those unknown almighty beings. Wasn't the reclusive ancient demon court also a force formed by living beings from another world? Wasn't the dragon clan of the Four Seas, the overlord of the Endless Sea, also a species from another world? As the inheritor of the ancient demon court, it was understandable that Lin Yuan knew about the other world, right? Then there were only two paths at the moment. One was to watch Lin Yuan support the Red Dust Assembly, perfect their Red Dust scripture, and deduce it into the complete soul sculpting chant. Then they would watch the Red Dust Assembly soar, sweeping away the present southern sects and ether assemblies, and recreating an environment like the northern frontier. The other was to lower their heads and honestly work for Lin Yuan, helping him revive the Red Dust Assembly. In the future, the northern cultivation world would naturally be under the control of the Northern Frontier Academy. The Dark World had the Demon Emperor Association, and in the south, there might be a Southern Academy and an Ether Assembly that could compete with the Demon Emperor Association. At the same time, sitting cross-legged in the Red Dust Inn, Lin Yuan stretched out his hand to support his cheek, with a thoughtful look, and murmured, "I thought the Red Dust Assembly was just a force with a long history. I didn't expect that there was such a big secret hidden in it." Although his realm hadn't reached that level, he had already embarked on the path of the totem ancient god. Lin Yuan couldn't reach the level of Hongjun, who could even feel a stranger's name, but if someone related to him called his name, he could still detect and observe it. He just wanted to give the Red Dust Assembly a sweet date. He didn't expect that the sensitive Zhang Xiu would give him such a big gift. The supreme being of the human clan and the ancestral demon of the demon clan, at this level, could be called a demigod existence. They had to cultivate a large number of believers to provide the power of incense. Only then could they take the last step in their limited lifespan and become a real god, comparable to the dragon gods of the dragon clan of the Four Seas, and the powerful beings of the Heavenly Gate who could suppress the dragon gods. Was there a flaw in the soul sculpting chant? What was missing was this part. In fact, after stepping into the divine realm, one couldn't simply be described as a cultivation realm. Referring to the so-called immortal monarchs, immortal kings, and immortal emperors in the novels of his previous life, it would be more appropriate to call them the great divine powers and the weak divine powers in the Western divine system. At this level, one could move mountains and fill seas with a wave of their hand. They were immortal and indestructible. Even if the world was destroyed, the true God wouldn't fall. In the chaotic world, this step was the so-called saint realm. After becoming a true God, there were still differences in strength, but the strength came from having more believers and more power of incense. The power of a true God didn't have a limit. One strike would consume enough power of incense and the world would be destroyed in an instant. But the upper limit was the upper limit. Without the power of incense, the true God was essentially in existence with one or two more attribute points than the supreme being and the ancestral demon. Why was Hongjun so strong? Because he was a saint. Whether it was Sanqing, Nuwa, or the so-called saints of the chaotic world, they were all his disciples. From the divine system's point of view, these people were his inferior gods. The power of incense they obtained was similar to how Badu had to pay tribute to Lin Yuan. It also had to be shared with Hongjun. The stronger these saints were, the stronger Hongjun would be. The disciples of the saints were actually cultivating believers for Hongjun. This was the truth of the chaotic world. The so-called power of merit was actually the power of incense. It was just that Hongjun had changed a set of words and made the entire chaotic world his employees. Therefore, since then no one could become a saint. Even existences like Nuwa who had become saints of merit could only become saints because the way of heaven was still way of heaven at that time and wasn't controlled by Hongjun. Strictly speaking, these saints couldn't defeat Hongjun and had to submit to him. That was why the following cultivation tribulations broke the chaotic world and caused many survivors of the chaotic world and a part of the origin of the way of heaven to flee. Chapter 792. If I had enough incense, would I be able to fight Hongjun? If I had enough lower gods, would I be able to? No, I wouldn't be able to. Lin Yuan's breathing suddenly quickened, and the delicate features on his face became slightly distorted. The moment that thought arose, he almost fell into the devil's path. If he nurtured enough lower gods and had enough believers, would he be able to become an existence like Hongjun? Then would Hongjun still be his archenemy? If he had killed Hongjun in the final battle and was influenced by this thought, nothing would have changed. It was just that the name Hongjun had been changed to Lin Yuan. Nothing would have changed. Sooner or later, a new Lin Yuan would appear and replace him as Hongjun. Then everything would become an endless cycle. No, I have to get rid of this thought. Lin Yuan bit the tip of his tongue. Under the intense pain, all kinds of desires went away, and his mind became much clearer. What was Hongjun? It was an existence above the rules, and it could tamper with the rules as it wished. If he wanted to get rid of this thought, then he could only let the rules be above everything. But if he did that, it seemed that he had walked the old path that the system had arranged for him, and he had become a tool. The system, which had been spying on Lin Yuan's thoughts since some time ago, timely spoke, indicating that it was still alive, and hoped that it could dispel the dangerous thoughts in Lin Yuan's mind. I know very well that I'm not a kind person. If I have more power than that person, it's hard to guarantee that I won't become the next him. Even if I can stay awake, it can't be forever. A few eras for an immortal existence is really too short, isn't it? That's why your plan is pretty good. You won't be able to catch up to your existence because your host is everywhere in the universe. You can go to other hosts at any time. Once you've developed your wretchedness, that will be the moment of the final battle. Even if that person is invincible, he won't dare to say that he'll definitely win. But at the end of the day, according to your original thinking, you will either win this war or keep it this way, unless he is ruthless enough to destroy the myriad heavens and completely eliminate you, an unstable factor. But I think if he could do that, he would have done it long ago. The fact that you are still alive now proves that he can't do it. A cruel wolf who can enslave the untainted land won't be merciful no matter how you think about it. In the past, the hosts followed the path you planned and grew rapidly, becoming stronger and stronger. They started to become enemies with that person because they didn't think of this step. But I'm sorry, I've thought it through and I've thought of a third solution. Do you want to hear it? The smile on Lin Yuan's face suddenly turned strange. After a moment of silence, Lin Yuan changed the topic and said with a smile, "At this time, you may be thinking of ways to destroy me in advance so that I won't disrupt your plan. I can understand that. But I have to advise you not to have any dangerous thoughts because I'm very crazy. Before I'm destroyed, I can't guarantee that I won't say his name silently through my body that you can't see." The system typed an ellipsis again. Hongjun was his old rival. He knew very well what kind of means he had. Once Lin Yuan did that, Hongjun would definitely protect the existence he wanted to kill. At that time he would have to face Hongjun and Lin Yuan, who might be even more terrifying than Hongjun. His chances of winning would be lowered again, and the dormant period would be infinitely prolonged. When Hongjun and Lin Yuan thought of a way to kill him, everything would be over. You see, you didn't participate in this war from the beginning to the end. You only chose a few people and gave them a shortcut to grow quickly. You tried to turn them into your puppets. But to say something from my previous life, those who treat others as fools are often the fools themselves. Do you think that if I can think of this step, others can't think of it? You think that you'll win for sure, but that's bullshit. Others might have thought of it, but they lacked the courage, or they might have been controlled by their desires and wanted to kill him and replace him. But I'm different. First, I don't want to replace him. Second, I don't like to be a tool. So I have a third solution, and that is a draw. Lin Yuan slowly communicated with the system telepathically. Don't be silly. That's impossible. Do you think that after fighting with him for so many years, there's still a possibility of a draw between us? Do you think that I'm willing to be controlled by him, or that he's willing to give up everything now and take the initiative to bow to us? Lin Yuan, I admit that you have a lot of potential. Out of all the hosts I've chosen, you're the one who sees through everything the most. But your way of thinking is a bit too childish. Still, I'll say it again. Even in your dreams, you should have a sense of propriety. The system snorted at Lin Yuan's words. You've misunderstood. The draw I'm talking about is not for you to play with him, but for us hosts to play with him. Even if you're now setting up a system of one host per world, when the day of the final battle comes, all of us will gather in the chaos world and challenge him, right? It's your choice to cultivate a host who can kill him, but you can't guarantee that the host who kills him won't become the next him. So, you hope that all the hosts will become your puppets. As long as you think about it, you can turn them into ashes. This is understandable. But from today onwards, I hope that you can release them from their restraints. This is good for all of us. You should know very well that if there's only one ultimate master in the world, his appearance will be inevitable. It's just a matter of time. So, if you want to stabilize your position, there's only one way to go. Create a world where most people can become him and let these people restrict each other. If not, your position won't be stable. If another him comes, do you think you can still escape this time? Lin Yuan smiled and leaned back in his chair. He pointed at his head and said, I've said it before. I'm crazy. My interest in becoming him is not as great as going to the world of my previous life to take revenge. So, if that day really comes, I'll definitely be on your side. What do you think? This path was good for everyone. Hongjun would definitely die, but everyone had the potential to become Hongjun. Even if the final winner was the heavenly axiom, it would not be able to become a dictator above everything. If the people below could keep each other in check, the heavenly axiom would still be able to maintain its position, but it would only be limited to playing the role of the rules. However, it could directly prevent another Hongjun from appearing at the source. Let me think about it. In the struggle between the system and Lin Yuan, for the first time, the system's heart was shaken. Chapter 793. The next day, early in the morning, Lin Yuan let out a long sigh, ending a night of cultivation. He got out of bed, washed up, and put on his clothes. Peak of the airborne realm. However, in terms of attributes, Guan Zhaoshan's body had more attribute points than Lin Yuan's when he was at the same level. It could be seen that the black snake body Lin Yuan had occupied before had poor aptitude. It was not only the speed at which it gained attribute points, but also the attribute points required for advancement could not be compared to the limit of attribute points at a single level. Of course, the aptitude of Lin Yuan's body followed the trend. Generally, when one reached a certain level, their attributes would be the same. However, Guan Zhaoshan's special constitution could not be generalized. Guan Zhaoshan's body leveled up faster than Lin Yuan's body in the early stages, because the speed at which they gained attribute points could not be compared. However, in the later stages, the attribute points required for advancement of such a special constitution were bound to be terrifying. Lin Yuan was invincible among those of the same level because of the various skills he had. People with Guan Zhaoshan's constitution could also be invincible among those of the same level because their attributes crushed those of the same level. Using Guan Zhaoshan's interface at the peak of the airborne realm to activate the blood boil technique, Lin Yuan estimated that those who were at the early stage of the heavenly strength realm, who had transformed their spiritual qi into vigor, would not necessarily be able to gain any advantage against him. How to put it? There were pros and cons. Without Lin Yuan's cheating system, even if Guan Zhaoshan's aptitude was extraordinary and could consecutively break through the extraordinary, airborne, and other realms in a short time, after reaching the heavenly strength realm, although her combat strength was the best of her peers, the speed of advancement would definitely not be as fast as those geniuses without special constitutions. Whether it was cultivators or monsters, their biggest enemy was never their own kind but one of the rules, time. Whether it was a hero or a beauty, if they could not reach the end of the path of cultivation and become an immortal god, sooner or later, they would be a pile of dust. So what if they were invincible among those of the same level? If their cultivation did not reach that level, they would also die of old age in their beds. Immortals who were extremely close to immortality all had an end similar to the 5 decays of heaven. Shaking his head, he cleared the distracting thoughts and returned to his normal state of thinking. The breakthrough mission had not been triggered yet. He probably needed some kind of opportunity. Demon sect? Lin Yuan's hands gently swayed in the water basin, and a bitter smile appeared on his face. The mission to break through from the mortal evolution state to the airborne realm was to wipe out the Lulan forces in Jianghu City. If the mission to break through from the airborne realm to the Heaven's Dipper realm was to wipe out the demonic cult, it would be too difficult. Moreover, the attribute points gained from killing during the mission couldn't be saved indefinitely. He would have to waste more attribute points than last time. I hope not. Sighing softly, Zhang Xian drove his jinqi and evaporated the water on his hands. Thud. There was a light knock on the door. Who? Lin Yuan glanced sideways and asked softly. His right hand was quietly placed on the hilt of Guan Shanshua's saber. The perception of the eye of the divine god was blocked. In other words, he could clearly sense every movement on the streets outside, but everything in the red dust inn seemed to have been erased by some unknown power. If he was not in the red dust inn, he would have thought that this was a non-existent space. A mighty figure had descended. Lin Yuan even felt that a blood-red danger word had appeared above his head. "It's me." The innkeeper's somewhat flattering voice was heard. "Lord Dragon King, we've done what you asked us to do. The Supreme Dragon King is waiting for you in the lobby downstairs. Oh, those people you asked for have all been captured by us." I'll be right there." Lin Yuan responded faintly, but he never let his guard down. The half-step Kongming Taoist Red Dust was not someone he could provoke with his current body. Even if he had to bite the bullet and say that the other party was at the peak of the Heaven's Dipper realm, his attribute points were still there. With his current body, if he were to make a move, it would be like using an egg to smash a rock. However, he had no other choice now. If the person who blocked his perception was not the Red Dust Taoist Red Dust, then the person who dared to come to the Red Dust and to cause trouble for him would not be someone easy to deal with. They definitely did not take the Red Dust Taoist Red Dust and the Ether Society seriously. At the very least, they would be at the Kongming realm or a level higher than the Dao Initiation realm. Since he could not escape, he could only go downstairs. If he hesitated, he would only lose face. Pushing open the door, Lin Yuan saw the smiling innkeeper. He nodded slightly and walked down the stairs. Halfway down the stairs, Lin Yuan's gaze fell on an old man in the lobby. Navy blue Taoist robes, white embroidered cloth shoes and coiled hair. He did not look like a white-haired old man with a youthful complexion. He was just an old man dressed like a Taoist. The only thing that caught Lin Yuan's attention was the black and white Tai Chi diagram embroidered on the old man's robes. Buddhism, Taoism, and Confucianism all existed in the Jianghu continent. However, the difference between the Taoists here and the Taoists in Lin Yuan's previous world was like heaven and earth. They were more like the cultivators in fantasy novels, not the Taoists in his previous world who hid in the mountains during prosperous times and helped the world during troubled times. The pattern of the Tai Chi yin-yang fish was also a symbol of Taoism in his previous life. However, the Taoists in this world did not have such a symbol. They only practiced Taoism techniques, which was different from the cultivation system of Confucianism and Buddhism. The immeasurable heavenly venerate for blessings. Glancing at the Tai Chi yin-yang fish, Lin Yuan did not wait for the old man to speak before he smiled and said, "In the movies and TV series in his previous world, Taoist disciples would always say, 'the immeasurable heavenly venerate,' when they met people. However, this was not to prove their identity as a Taoist disciple. The immeasurable heavenly venerate was also not the same as Sanqing in the movies and TV series. There was no such person as the immeasurable heavenly venerate in the primitive cultivation world. The phrase, 'the immeasurable heavenly venerate for blessings' was a greeting used by Taoist cultivators when they met a fellow Taoist. It was also a form of blessing, which meant that they wished for immeasurable blessings. When facing ordinary people, Taoist disciples would say, 'the supreme heavenly venerate for Tai.' This was the honorific used to call out to the Taoist immortal god of the East Pole Azure Splendor. It meant that they were calling out to the Taoist immortal god to remove misfortune from ordinary people. A sect that had been passed down for countless years would not be so superficial as to call out, 'the immeasurable heavenly venerate for blessings.' The immeasurable heavenly venerate for blessings." Compared to Lin Yuan's calmness, the old man's tone was obviously more excited. Only the busy servants around them looked at each other in confusion. Good heavens, are you two talking in riddles? Although Lin Yuan knew that Taoist Red Dust was not from his hometown, and was only a disciple of the Taoist inheritance in this world, he could not help but feel a sense of familiarity when he saw something familiar. Lin Yuan nodded slightly at Taoist Red Dust. Then, with a thought in his mind, he sent a message to the old man through All Things Have Soul. "The Red Dust Society is working for me, so I'll naturally give them some benefits. However, you don't have to come here personally for such a small matter. If you have any requests, please speak your mind. I'll tell you in advance if you can do it or not, so that we won't be embarrassed." Chapter 794. Hearing this, Red Dust was slightly startled. Before coming here, he had thought about how the Sky Demon, who was able to suppress the Northern Shenwu dynasty and even cause headaches for the Gate of Heaven's guards, would be difficult to communicate with in the northern frontier. But Lin Yuan's calmness at this moment really caught him off guard. But this was also good. Although he had some extravagant hopes in his heart, especially when Lin Yuan said the greeting of the ancestors, the fire in his heart burned even more vigorously. But whether Lin Yuan had the ability to do so, he wasn't sure. It was better to say this first so that both sides wouldn't be embarrassed. This sentence sounded sarcastic, but it was Lin Yuan's goodwill. After all, Although the Red Dust Society couldn't be compared to the Ether Society, there weren't many forces in the Southern Dark World that could say that their comprehensive ability was superior to the Red Dust Society. If Lin Yuan didn't want to use the Ether Society, then the Red Dust Society could be said to be his biggest help. If the Red Dust Society did things for Lin Yuan at all costs, but in the end he only said that he was powerless, even Buddha would be angry. My Red Dust Society, Taoist Red Dust cleared his throat and his expression turned serious. I know, the God Sculpting Sect. There's no need to mention these things, just get to the point. Lin Yuan's strange eyes flashed with a wisp of light, and he said expressionlessly, the God Sculpting Sect dominated the Southern Dark World. If we go back to the time when the Gate of Heaven opened for the first time, the gods and Buddhas cast down their cultivation methods from the clouds. When it was destroyed, it was already more than 2,000 years ago. You weren't even born at that time, so what do you know? Secrets of the sect? Are you sure that the documents recorded in the sect are all true? This Red Dust's breathing stagnated slightly and his face darkened. There were indeed some secrets recorded in the sect, but no one could be sure that those secrets were true, or were embellished and altered by later generations. To give a simple example, the destruction of the God Sculpting Sect had too many inexplicable points. An individual was an individual and a sect was a sect. No matter how strong a genius was, other forces would only be afraid of him, and he would not be able to directly protect a sect. Unless his cultivation level was the highest in the world, and he could destroy the inheritance of the entire cultivation world by himself. However, this was obviously unrealistic. Even someone as strong as Hong Jun could only watch the untainted world fall apart, and the creatures of various races flee to other worlds, becoming one troublesome problem after another. Furthermore, those who were able to cultivate to such a level were not easy to deal with in any aspect. Not everyone had a cheat like Lin Yuan, who only needed to complete the task of breaking through to the next realm to break through to the next realm. The orthodox path of cultivation required a solid foundation, one step at a time. One also needed to comprehend the way through the experience of the previous cultivators in order to overcome the bottleneck. If a person who only knew how to cultivate and fight fanatically could break through to the next realm that was beyond the reach of ordinary people, it was undoubtedly because of the existence of a cheat, and not because of his extraordinary aptitude. Therefore, even if that amazing genius really did rely on his own strength to protect the sect, he would not have patted his ass and directly entered the Gate of Heaven, crossing the sea of bitterness to find the source of the soul-sculpting secret art. At that time, there were definitely many powerhouses in the God Sculpting sect. In addition, there were also other backup plans. After doing all this, he would have floated away. Then there was the matter of the God Sculpting sect's funeral. What was the situation on the other side of the Gate of Heaven? Even the Gate of Heaven's guardian might not know, so how did the God Sculpting sect know about the fall of that amazing genius? In addition, even if they did know about this matter, they would have kept it a secret. They would never have told the entire cultivation world of the Sky Martial continent that their biggest backer had fallen. Wasn't this just asking for a hammer? How low did their IQ have to be to do such a thing? After all, the God Sculpting sect was an unhindered cultivation sect. A single amazing genius had almost defeated the entire world. If this level of inheritance did not have a backer, then it would be a huge piece of fat meat. In an instant, it would attract endless hungry wolves to eat it. Discerning people knew that the destruction of the God Sculpting sect in the past was mostly due to the hands of greedy traders. But in this struggle, the traders took the initiative and tampered with the sect's secrets. But before they could eat the benefits, the other sects also heard the news and directly joined forces to destroy the God Sculpting sect, nibbling away at it until there was nothing left, and almost severing its inheritance. Looking at the leopard through a tube, one could see the whole picture. Even the destruction of the God Sculpting sect was so exaggerated, so how could the other sect's secrets be trusted? Sir Dragon King seems to come from the world that the old ancestor wanted to go to. Today's Red Dust Assembly has declined, but I am not willing to be silent. I want those people, as well as their successors and descendants, to pay the price in blood. I do not expect Sir Dragon King to help me with this matter, but I am willing to use the entire Red Dust Assembly as a bargaining chip to ask the Dragon King to rewrite the soul sculpting chant for me. I do not ask to perfect it to the level that the old ancestor wanted, but to restore the level that allowed the God Sculpting sect to dominate the world. Taoist Red Dust slightly bowed his head and said in a deep voice, "If you can help me fulfill this wish, then from now on, I am willing to serve Sir Dragon King to the death." Lin Yuan was silent. Although he had expected it. But Taoist Red Dust's appetite was bigger than he thought. If a cultivation method that could be cultivated to the supreme realm were to spread out, then even the strength of the Ether Assembly would rush to work for Lin Yuan. After all, these so-called first-class forces were one after another. As long as they did not have the backing of the Heavenly Gate Protector in the northern frontier, then the limit of a cultivation method was to cultivate to the Void Realm. Deducing the Red Dust Assembly 2 realms, and then calling for the loyalty of a quasi-first-class force? This transaction could not be said to be a loss, but it could be said that whoever did it was a fool. Lin Yuan indifferently shook his head and said, "You should be very clear about what level of cultivation method the soul sculpting technique is. It's not that I want to speak harshly, but you want to exchange the soul sculpting technique with these rotten sweet potatoes and stinky bird eggs of the Red Dust faction? Do you think this king is a fool?" When Lin Yuan's voice fell, Taoist Red Dust's face suddenly changed. With a light tap of his foot, his figure flew back 10 meters, and a thick color of horror flashed in his eyes. Just now he felt an extremely dangerous aura from Lin Yuan. Although it was not strong enough to take his life, it was more than enough to severely injure him. Although he did not know what kind of price Lin Yuan had to pay to launch this attack, he was very clear that Lin Yuan was not born a dragon. Originally Lin Yuan was just a poisonous snake. Poisonous snakes were creatures that would not bare their fangs if they could not find the opportunity to kill in one strike. Chapter 795. What the Dragon King said is not what I want, but I can't do it. The Red Dust Taoist said with a bitter look on his face. The God Sculpting sect was indeed powerful back in the day, but they have been besieged and intercepted by various forces over the years. Their foundation has been whittled down over and over again. Now, they have fallen from being an overlord force to the point where they can only hang around with the Greenwood forces. They feel that there is no need to waste any more time on us, otherwise we would have been nothing but bones in the grave. Maybe the Dragon King doesn't care about the Red Dust Society, but this is all I have. Ding. Congratulations to the host for reaching the peak of the airborne realm. The breakthrough mission has been triggered. Please subdue the Red Dust Society and make them serve you wholeheartedly. Mission reward: breakthrough of a major realm, a second-rate cultivation method and a third-rate martial art. Failure punishment: depriving the host of control over Guanzhaoshan. The sudden appearance of the system prompt caused Lin Yuan's expression to change subtly. Although the system would assign missions according to the implementation of the mission, it rarely let Lin Yuan make a loss. The soul sculpting mantra was an extraordinary existence in the eyes of the Red Dust Society, but in the eyes of the system, it was only a second-rate cultivation method at best. However, if such a cultivation method were to be spread, it would be enough to set off a bloody storm. Even the Guardians of the Elysium would have to intervene. In the end, it was all in exchange for the Red Dust Society's allegiance? For Lin Yuan, who walked the path of the ancient totem gods and advocated fair trade, this was very difficult to accept. If he were to describe it in a more mysterious way, it would damage his mind. The system would not kill the goose that laid the golden egg. Even if it was dissatisfied with what he said before, it would not be so heartless as to turn against him now. Moreover, although Guanzhaoshan was a good chess piece for Lin Yuan to nail into the south, with the foundation of the Ether Society, even without Guanzhaoshan the linkage from the north to the south would not be a loss. But without Lin Yuan this trump card, when would the system see the hope of killing Hongjun? It wasn't that Lin Yuan would definitely win against Hongjun. It was just that there were now more than 9,000 hosts. If they continued to count, the number of hosts selected by the system would at least add one digit to this number. However, among so many hosts, Lin Yuan was indeed the one that the system favored the most. Otherwise, it wouldn't have endured to this extent. Seeing that Lin Yuan didn't follow the path it had planned and become the kind of puppet it had hoped for, it didn't interfere too much. It wasn't that he didn't want to, but he didn't dare. This also showed that the Red Army could not do anything to the Red Army for a while, but it was not without ideas. Even if it wanted to continue, it had to see if Hongjun was willing. When to start the final battle was no longer a problem that it could decide alone. After thinking for a while, Lin Yuan's eyes suddenly became strange. This dog, is it messing with me? He suddenly realized that there were only two possibilities for this mission to be triggered. The first was that the secret behind the Red Dust Society might be more than they knew, and that the amazing genius from back then might not have fallen. In the system's plan, this person was very likely to be a very important ally. The second possibility was that the system actually didn't care about the Red Dust Society. It was purely coveting Guanzhaoshan, who had a special constitution and excellent aptitude. The birth of humans came from Yua's creation of humans. This did not belong to the authority of the heavenly Tao. Therefore, no matter how many hosts it selected and placed in various worlds, the system could only give them the identity of monsters. It was impossible to fabricate or possess an existence with aptitude like Guan Zhaoshan. It couldn't even create a human. Although Lin Yuan had created many humans through the system's soldier creation model, Lin Yuan knew that these people were still monsters in essence. In addition to having the system panel, they also had the bloodlines and special abilities of various monsters. They also had some defects such as being unable to cultivate on their own. Strictly speaking, they could only be considered as demi-humans who were more human-like than demi-humans. However, through the transaction of rules, the system might be able to obtain control of Guan Zhaoshan's body. It was just that the system itself was unable to interfere with the operation of this world. Its transaction partner could only be a host like Lin Yuan. So here came the question. Why did the system care about Guan Zhaoshan's body? The answer was very simple. It wanted to hang a blade over Lin Yuan's head. Guan Zhaoshan's aptitude was extraordinary. Within the same realm, her basic attributes were at least 3 to 5 times that of a normal person, perhaps even more. The further one cultivated, the greater this difference would become. In other words, if an existence like Guan Zhaoshan obtained the same system as Lin Yuan, coupled with the heartless heavenly Tao special ability, she would be able to kill without restraint. In a short period of time, Guan Zhaoshan would be able to step on Lin Yuan's head and become a sharp blade that could fall at any time. This was a threat and also revenge. If the system had a new method, then the disloyal Lin Yuan wouldn't be a match for Guan Zhaoshan, even if he used the blood-boiling technique. Not to mention, the speed at which the two of them grew was incomparable. I'll remember this grudge. Lin Yuan cursed in his heart. Once the system's mission was triggered, there was no possibility of refusing. Refusing to carry out the mission was equivalent to failing the mission. Fortunately, there were still rules operating in the unseen world. That level of power, even if the system was the source of the great desolate world's heavenly Tao, it still couldn't contend against it. When issuing a mission, it had to give a corresponding reward. The harsher the mission's punishment, the more generous the reward would be. Subduing the Red Dust faction, the reward was a second-rate heart cultivation method, a third-rate martial skill, and a breakthrough in Guan Zhaoshan. As for the standard of a second-rate heart cultivation method, Lin Yuan couldn't use the standards of the Sky Martial continent to measure it. However, he could be sure of one thing. Even if the incomplete soul sculpting technique was completely restored in the eyes of the system, it would only be a second-rate technique. Same here, same here. The system didn't show any fear in its reply. What was it afraid of? Although Lin Yuan was no longer the little monstrous beast that had just arrived in this world, his path of growth wasn't something the system could interfere with. Even if he left it, he would still be able to survive. However, strictly speaking, Lin Yuan was still far from being a threat to it. Although it wasn't a match for Hongjun, it was still an opponent that could give Hongjun a headache, if it wanted to put its threat into practice. For Lin Yuan, he could either directly rely on Hongjun, on the premise that he could escape from being killed, or he could slowly cultivate. The first step was to become an immortal true god, and then accumulate a large amount of Joss flames. At the very least, he had to reach the point where he could speak on equal terms with Hongjun. Only then would he have the ability to directly harm the source of the heavenly Tao. Chapter 796. Taoist Hong Chen felt uneasy at the moment. He wanted to say something but did not know what to say. That was because Lin Yuan's reaction was very strange after he told Taoist Hong Chen that everything he did was for the Red Dust Society. Yes, it was very strange. First, his expression changed slightly, as if he wanted to reject Taoist Hong Chen directly. However, there was something that he could not say. Then his eyes suddenly became dangerous. His eyes were as sharp as knives and swords, which made Taoist Hong Chen feel a chill in his heart. As a grand cultivator who had lived in the dark world for more than 100 years, Taoist Hong Chen was no stranger to this kind of look. It was the look of an enemy. Usually, when this kind of look appeared, its owner would be furious and even have the thought of cutting off all means of retreat. Was this Black Jiao communicating with an existence in the unseen world? Taoist Hong Chen could not help but suck in a breath of cold air as soon as he thought of this. No one knew where this Black Jiao came from, but it seemed to have appeared out of thin air. In less than 3 years, it easily became the overlord of the demonic beast forest. Then it entered the Hengduan Mountains alone and became the king of beasts. Then, it changed its practice of sneaking into the Hengduan Mountains to cultivate. Instead, it turned around and went straight to the northern frontier. It wiped out the mountain bar city and pacified the northern frontier. It laid the foundation of the north, which was now like a paradise. It could also be said that it laid the foundation of the 7th dynasty. After that, the Sky Demon was in chaos. The northern frontier directly resisted the invincible army of the Sky Demon with more than a third of the territory of the Shenwu Emperor. It even forced the Sky Demon to give up the cooperation with the Devil Cult in the south and go all out to fight the northern frontier. However, it still did not gain any advantage. Of course, the fact that Sky Demon did not gain any benefits was only a speculation, but it was also reasonable. The undying and indestructible Sky Demon was an existence that even the protectors of the Heavenly Gate had a headache over. Those that had just been born were still fine. They could be brought back to a forbidden land and use Taoist techniques, Buddhist techniques and Confucian mantras to eliminate their evil aura. They could be eliminated in a few decades or a few centuries. However, as for those that had matured Sky Demon, even if they were defeated and captured, they could only be sent to a forbidden land to be sealed. They would become hidden dangers buried in the Jianghu continent. As time passed, there was no lack of powerful Sky Demons that had broken out and stirred up a storm. But what about the northern frontier? It didn't matter if you were a newcomer or a veteran, you wouldn't end up well. The heavenly demons were no different from ordinary people over there. Every death meant one less. Otherwise, the heavenly demons wouldn't have given up on all their deployments and attacked the north with all their might. Even so, the heavenly demon army was only stationed at the banks of the Wei River. They hadn't even stepped into the north's territory. It had to be said that Lin Yuan, who had appeared out of nowhere, was definitely a mysterious and unfathomable legend. However, things like legends were just that. The junior overcame the senior, ended the 10,000 Swords dynasty, and created the Shenwu dynasty. In just a few decades, the Shenwu dynasty was able to stand shoulder to shoulder with the other 6 old empires and even challenge the protectors of the Heavenly Gate. Was this not a legend? But what was the result? Under the Sky Demon's chaos, the Shenwu dynasty was almost powerless to fight back. It was said that even Lei Qiuxing died in the hands of the Sky Demon. If the Black Jiao really came from the source of all cultivation methods, and could communicate with the existence of the underworld, then the potential of this Black Jiao had been underestimated by everyone. This king thought about it. Lin Yuan's eyes narrowed and he said in a deep voice, "The God Sculpting sect has made too many enemies. To be able to keep the Red Dust Society, it can be said that their background is extraordinary. However, this king has always paid attention to fairness when doing things. For example, if the Red Dust Society worked for this king, then this king agreed to let the Red Dust Society pull the banner of the Ether Society and lead the entire southern forest. For many people, this reward is no doubt an exceptional reward. But for this king, this is just a matter of a few words from this king. However, the actions of the Red Dust Society have saved this king a lot of time, so it can be called an equal transaction." Seeing that Lin Yuan's tone had softened, the Red Dust Taoist also breathed a sigh of relief. His aptitude was not ordinary, otherwise, it would be impossible for him to cultivate the incomplete Red Dust scripture, which had been improved by generations of ancestors to the point that it was inferior to the incomplete Red Dust scripture, and still cultivate it to the extreme, reaching the half-step void realm. However, his aptitude was limited to this point. His cultivation had reached the limit, but it was not his own fault that he was stuck in the realm, but because of the limitations of his cultivation method, he had no choice but to bow his head. How many times had the Red Dust scripture been revised? How many ancestors' understandings and experiences had been combined? To put it simply, if the Red Dust Taoist wanted to revise the Red Dust scripture, he would have to fully comprehend the experiences of all these people. It was equivalent to fighting against countless seniors alone, and then making changes based on this foundation. Moreover, he might not be able to revise the Red Dust scripture to a better level, because he was only a half-step void realm cultivator. The scenery of the void realm was something he could only stand on his tiptoes and look at from afar. Wanting to touch and feel it was a fool's dream. As an example of an armchair strategist, one could refer to Ma Su and Zhao Qua, and also the ancestors of the God Sculpting sect. A complete cultivation method that could allow one to become a supreme had been revised to the limit of a half-step void realm cultivator. Although this could be due to the pressure from various parties, They had no choice but to repeatedly deteriorate their cultivation method to make the various forces that had participated in the encirclement of the god-sculpting sect no longer fear the remnants of the god-sculpting sect. However, this move had indeed caused the later generations to suffer miserably. The Red Dust Taoist was not an exception, and could only be regarded as a typical example. Although the Red Dust Taoist had previously gone into seclusion to revise the Red Dust scripture, he was very clear that the success rate was so low that it made one's hair stand on end. The Dragon King's will is my will. From today onwards, the Red Dust Association will follow the Dragon King's lead. The Red Dust Taoist bowed slightly and said with a serious expression. Lin Yuan raised his eyebrows slightly. There was no prompt for the mission's success. However, it was also true that he did not give any benefits. If he could get the White Wolf to swear allegiance without risking anything, Lin Yuan would have to wonder if this Guan Zhaoxin was a different world's version of Long Outyen. After all, she had a special physique, and she had the special ability to open her mouth and take in underlings. The only thing left was that her gender was wrong. I'll say it again. I'll say it first. Lin Yuan glanced sideways at the Red Dust Taoist and said in a deep voice, "You want me to recultivate the soul sculpting scripture? I can't do it. The soul sculpting scripture is a cultivation method from outside the gate of heaven. It is unfathomable and difficult to understand. It is possible to cultivate it step by step, but to improve it is not something that can be done by human strength. Your god-sculpting sect's ancestor defeated all the masters in the world, and yet he still could not complete it. Although I do not dare to say that I am immortal, I can barely call myself a hero. Therefore this matter is not something that I can do." The Red Dust Taoist's face changed, and he opened his mouth to speak but hesitated. Chapter 797. Taoist Red Dust felt bitter in his heart at this moment. He was well aware that even if he changed the Red Dust scripture, not to mention recreating the soul-sculpting secret art of the past, he might not even be able to modify it to a better state than the current Red Dust scripture. Therefore he had high hopes for Lin Yuan. At this moment, it could be said that the greater the expectations, the greater the disappointment. If Lin Yuan could not improve the Red Dust scripture and recreate the soul-sculpting secret art, why would he risk his entire family's fortune to work for Lin Yuan? In addition, the soul-sculpting secret art is also an ancient cultivation method. Although I don't know what kind of changes have taken place in the world, didn't your sect's secret manual mention that many of the essences of the soul-sculpting secret art cannot be cultivated due to the changes in the world's laws? This is not something that can be done by human strength and involves the world itself. Even if the creator of the soul-sculpting secret art were to come here, he would not dare to say that he could repair the soul-sculpting secret art. At most, he would be able to create a new cultivation method. Similarly, I cannot do this, but I can come up with a cultivation method that is on the same level as the soul-sculpting secret art. I dare not say that this cultivation method is stronger than the complete version of the soul-sculpting secret art, but I can guarantee that this cultivation method is not weak. Moreover, it also contains the methods to reach the Supreme Being realm. This is something that the soul-sculpting secret art cannot compare to. Lin Yuan crossed his arms over his chest, his face expressionless as he said, "That's all I have to say. Whether you want to leave or stay, it's all up to you to decide." The complete version of the soul-sculpting secret art was only a second-rate cultivation method. This was because if one cultivated this cultivation method to the extreme, they would only be able to cultivate to the immortal and indestructible true divinity realm. As for the first-rate cultivation methods, they would be able to impart secrets such as the way of the gods, the creation of a clan, and so on. As for the super first-rate cultivation methods, it was unknown whether they existed or not, but they would be able to teach one how to create a god system, and how to obtain the faith of the gods to achieve the sage realm. Simply put, the difference between super first-rate, and second-rate cultivation methods was not much. Cultivating them to the extreme would allow one to become a true divinity. However, the difference between them was like the difference between heaven and earth. That was because the realm of true God was the end of the path of cultivation. How strong or weak one would be after that would depend entirely on the power of incense. However, when it came to nurturing believers, creating clans, and establishing god systems, there was a huge difference between having someone to teach and not. If it was just nurturing believers, it would be fine. If they were lucky, they could just let them do as they pleased. But if they were bad, they would only be like Nuwa. Although she was crowned as the mother of humans in myths and legends, there were actually more humans who believed in other gods. This was just a difference in strength and speed of improvement. Creating a spawn tribe was much harsher. There was only one chance and it could be strengthened afterward but could not be taken back. It was a one-off business, and it was already a great fortune for Nuwa to create a perfect race. As for the spawn tribes that were not so mature, it would be difficult for them not to be eliminated by the times. Once they were eliminated, everything they had invested would be for naught, and the loss would be so great that it could be said to be tragic. As for creating a divine system, this wasn't difficult at all. However, it was difficult to distinguish between good and evil in a person's heart. This did not only refer to humans. As long as one had spiritual intelligence, one would have 7 emotions and 6 desires. No one could guarantee that the recently loyal subordinate gods would not suddenly bare their fangs when they were in trouble. Not to mention giving them a fatal blow, they would even swallow the corpses into their stomachs and turn them into nutrients to take over the position of God King. There were so many heroes in the northern frontier. Why did Lin Yuan only give Batu the position of God of War? Wasn't it because Batu had a permanent loyalty to him? These steps sounded simple, but the slightest mistake could be enough to ruin one's path to godhood. True gods were immortal and indestructible. That was only in relation to the power of nature. At this level they were already free from the restraints of most rules. However, there was one thing that was unavoidable. That was, if a person was killed he would die. Mortals could not kill true gods, but that did not mean that true gods could not kill true gods. It was just a small matter of how much power of incense was sacrificed. Learn from the omnipotent and omniscient existence in the West. Directly kill all the believers. Even if it was not enough to kill a true god directly, without believers to provide the power of incense, the power would be used less and less. When there was no more power of incense left, even a true god would naturally be annihilated or fall into a long slumber. Lin Yuan was very clear on how Rahu, who had been able to compete with Hongjun, had died. Rahu was an existence that even Hongjun had to join forces with other big shots to subdue. As a senior figure who had fought against Hongjun, Lin Yuan felt that he had to sum up Rahu's experience and lessons in order to avoid ending up in the same situation. Because in Lin Yuan's understanding, Rahu might be a senior's host. After all, it was hard to say where this master came from. It was recorded that he had absorbed the spiritual energy of the western untainted land and used the blood of the 3 races, the dragon and the Kirin, to break through the seal of the immortal slaying sword formation. According to this record, Rahu could be said to be a mighty figure who had joined forces with the evil slaying sword formation to provoke the first tribulation of the Dragon Han. However, the purpose of this record was only for his own personal gain. It was hard to say what this personal gain was. According to Lin Yuan's current understanding of the untainted land, the biggest personal gain in the untainted land was Hongjun. The next few cultivation tribulations were basically a big play where the creatures of the untainted land were unwilling to be exploited by Hongjun. Therefore, it was a bit of a stretch to say that Rahu had provoked the war between the 3 races. After all, it was just a play. Whether it was well shot or not, all the problems could not be pushed to Rahu the director, could they? Scriptwriters, actors, managers, post-production staff, could any of these guys stay out of it? During an avalanche, every snowflake bravely rushed to the end of the world. Back to the main topic. Lin Yuan could reach this step, create the clan tribe and establish the divine system. Everything came naturally. As long as his cultivation reached a certain level, his strength would continue to rise. Once he reached the true immortal realm, even the system could not do anything to him. Although this was due to the experiences he had read in the novels in his previous life, combined with the system's guidance, he was only able to reach this step. If a cultivator were to explore these steps on their own, one would count as 1. If 1 out of 10 could succeed, it would be considered a miracle. I'm afraid, Taoist Red Dust still had a hesitant look on his face. I know what you're worried about. After all, you only cultivate the Red Dust scripture. If the cultivation method is not compatible, even if I give you a cultivation method comparable to the soul sculpting mantra, you won't be able to cultivate it. Now that your Gang Chi is fixed, if you absorb a different kind of Gang Chi, it will be no different from self-detonation. Unless you're willing to abolish your cultivation and start all over again, but in that case your lifespan will be insufficient. So you're worried that even if I give you a cultivation method, you can only read it and not practice it. Lin Yuan's lips curled up slightly as if he had a card up his sleeve. Taoist Red Dust's face lit up with joy. He said in surprise, could it be that the Dragon King's cultivation method is compatible with the Red Dust scripture, and even, is very similar to my sect's soul sculpting mantra? Chapter 798. I don't know. Lin Yuan still maintained his confident smile as he spoke. You don't know? Taoist Red Dust was slightly startled and felt his breathing slow by half a beat. The aura chi in his body surged and a faint anger appeared in his eyes. Taoist Red Dust was able to lead the remnants of a sect that could be destroyed at any time into the world, and he even joined the Green Forest Circle to make a living. Naturally, he was not an easy person to deal with and his temper was not good either. When he saw Lin Yuan like this, he subconsciously thought that Lin Yuan was playing with him. Good boy, you don't know what your own cultivation method is like? He even talked about the secrets of the Red Dust Society, as if he had done some research in advance. Don't tell me you don't know the cultivation method of the Red Dust Scripture. It was ironic that the Red Dust Society's secret cultivation method, the Red Dust Scripture, was known to all the major forces in the southern cultivation world. The so-called secret cultivation method was targeted at ordinary people who joined the Red Dust Society, or the little geniuses who did not have the capital to join a first-class force, and could only mingle in a quasi-first-class or second-class force. The reason why all the forces knew about the Red Dust Scripture was because the various sects that participated in the God Sculpting sect were worried that the God Sculpting sect would rise again at any time. If another amazing genius appeared, they would all have to pay the price for the greed of their ancestors. However, with the size of the Red Dust Assembly, even if a first-class force wanted to destroy the Red Dust Assembly, they would have to suffer a great loss of vitality. If they were not careful, they might follow in the footsteps of the God Sculpting sect in the past. Coupled with the fact that they were drifting in the Jianghu, no one could guarantee that their own force would not become the next God Sculpting sect. Therefore, it was necessary to leave a way out for everyone. At the very least, if they were to encounter a similar tragedy in the future, as long as the opponent was not a particularly crazy existence, they would not directly lose their inheritance. However, the sects that knew about the Red Dust Scripture basically had the shadow of the Heavenly Gate Protector behind them. In fact, the forces that did not have the Heavenly Gate Protector involved also knew the specific content of the Red Dust Scripture. This was because Taoist Red Dust wasn't willing to stop at half-step Kongming for the rest of his life. He didn't hesitate to take out a rubbing of the Red Dust Scripture and went to various forces to ask them to learn and discuss the Tao. However, after so many years he didn't gain anything at all. Not to mention those sects that couldn't bear to see the rise of the Red Dust Society. Even those sects that had no enmity with the Red Dust Society wouldn't exchange their cultivation methods for the Red Dust Sutra, which was a half-step Kongming cultivation method. At most, they would provide some cultivation notes for him to read. However, that was the extent of his gains. Each and every one of those sects had learned the secular scripture. But soon, Taoist Hongqin calmed down. He looked at Lin Yuan in surprise and asked, "Could it be that your cultivation method didn't come from you?" But at this point he seemed to know that there were some taboos, so he didn't mention anything that shouldn't be mentioned. He just pointed at the void above with a puzzled expression on his face. Lin Yuan nodded calmly, without the slightest intention of avoiding the topic. At this moment there were a lot of people paying attention to this. In other words, there were a lot of people paying attention to Guanzhaoshan. Those guardians of the Heavenly Gate were all very arrogant. Every one of them who could be taught cultivation methods above the Kongming level was a genius among geniuses, a monster among monsters. After all, those first-rate sects and clans would rather have no disciples than have substandard ones. First-rate sects and clans had strict requirements to recruit disciples that could be said to be perverted. In the cultivation novels of Lu Xian's past life, only those with celestial spiritual roots would be accepted. I'm just asking you if you're scared. Those guardians of the Heavenly Gate chose their successors from this group of people who were like monsters in the eyes of their peers. They picked the ones who were even more monstrous, and then supplemented them with trials that had a mortality rate of nearly 80%. Only those who could survive the trials would be qualified to come in contact with the truth of the world, and only then would they be taught the true methods of immortality. However, such monsters among monsters were not easy to find. Some of the guardians of the Heavenly Gate would also pay attention to some of the loose cultivators in the secular world. How many days did it take for Guanzhaoshan to advance from the mortal realm to the airborne realm? Even Lin Yuan, who was amazed by the world, wasn't as talented as him. Therefore, it wasn't unexpected for Lin Yuan to be noticed by the guardians of the Heavenly Gate. Moreover, he didn't intend to hide it from the beginning. For example, his identity, his connection with the existence outside of the Heavenly Gate, and his ability to take out cultivation methods that could allow him to cultivate to the true God realm, which was the so-called transcendent realm in this world. There was no need to hide these things. If he couldn't take out anything, it would be coveted by others. After all, Lin Yuan had too many secrets. Even those giants at the level of the Transcendent Realm would be greedy for Lin Yuan's secrets. Transcendent Realm was just a name. Transcending most of the restrictions of the rules would only allow them to act more freely and follow their own desires. It didn't mean that they had truly transcended everything and became an existence without desires. Therefore, Lin Yuan had to learn how to show off his wealth. He had to let these Transcendent Realm experts know that there was someone above him. Moreover, he could casually take out a set of cultivation methods that could allow him to cultivate to the Transcendent Realm. This also meant that the person behind him was at least in the Transcendent Realm. Regardless of how long this tiger skin could last, it was enough to make some people temporarily retract their claws. Among the true high-level cultivators in the Jianghu continent, there was a saying: once a Transcendent Realm expert appeared, all disputes would cease. It wasn't only the Transcendent Realm experts who had such great prestige. Instead, it was a Transcendent Realm expert who could cause the Transcendent Realm expert to appear. In that case, the other party must also be in the Transcendent Realm. After cultivating to the point of being immortal and indestructible, who would be willing to fight to the death over a small dispute? Those who were beaten to death would suffer losses, but wouldn't those who beat others to death also suffer losses? Therefore, everyone stopped at a certain point and gave each other some face. No Transcendent Realm expert dared to fight to the death with another Transcendent Realm expert for the secrets that Lin Yuan had revealed. After all, the longer these people lived, the more they feared death. Otherwise, with the Heavenly Gate standing there, other than the first batch of true cultivators who wanted to see what was on the other side of the Heavenly Gate that had been bringing disaster to this world, the top cultivators in this world had already fallen. Otherwise, no one would dare to step out of the Heavenly Gate for so many years. I have no objections. I'm at the Dragon King's disposal. Taoist Red Dust bowed slightly towards Lin Yuan. His expression was resentful, as if he was glad that he didn't act out of anger. He wasn't stupid enough to ask for Lin Yuan's cultivation methods. After all, Lin Yuan had said before that a mere Red Dust society wasn't worth such a price. He had to work for Lin Yuan and bring in enough benefits. Only then would Lin Yuan feel that this transaction was fair. When that time came, Lin Yuan naturally wouldn't go against the agreement he had made. Chapter 799. In addition, Taoist Red Dust did not forget that he had a lot of enemies. Even if he had the support of the Ether Association and the Northern Frontier, what could he do? A person dying was like a lamp going out. He and Lin Yuan still had a cooperative relationship, so there was no distinction between superiors and subordinates. Whether those cultivation forces coveted this cultivation method or were worried about the rise of the soul sculpting sect, they would not sit idly by. At that time, what could he use to resist? If he died, then everything would be over. Lin Yuan would not be so righteous as to make an enemy of the entire southern sect for a person he met by chance. Even if Lin Yuan did not act like a monster beast, he was destined to never become a saint. Even if that day came, that was because Lin Yuan had already planned to make a move on the southern cultivation forces just like what he did in the north. Everything else was just an excuse. If Lin Yuan gave it to him, others would snatch it from him, but Lin Yuan would not care. If Lin Yuan did not give it to him, he would force it. Even if Lin Yuan did not make a move, he would still be in big trouble. First, bring those people to me. I want to kill them one by one. Second, summon all the leaders of the forest forces to Jianghu City. I have something to tell them. Lin Yuan put down his hands that were folded in front of his chest and blew gently, blowing away the hair on his forehead. The moment his right hand fell, a dark red color had splashed on the floor. The wound on his right hand had thawed, and it was once again in a bleeding posture. However, the current Lin Yuan was no longer immortal. A mere blood loss was not enough to take his life. Not to mention, after killing the Flying Star sect's senior apprentice brother, most of his wounds had already healed, so there was nothing to worry about. Ning Wang, Su Situ, and some miscellaneous officials and rogue cultivators were led into the Red Dust Inn one by one by the servants of the Red Dust Inn. Lin Yuan's face was indifferent as he maintained the action of drawing and retracting his blade, killing them one by one. The injury on his right hand was also healing quickly, gradually turning into a red line that looked like it was cut by an ordinary sharp weapon. It was no longer as ferocious and terrifying as before, where it had to be frozen to stop the bleeding. However, it was still not enough. Since Guan Zhaoshan's last wish mission had gone so far, the size of the wound did not matter. The bleeding from the initial wound would not have been enough to kill an airborne realm cultivator anyway. However, the wound had not completely healed, which meant that Lin Yuan had not completely completed Guan Zhaoshan's dying wish. 5 days had already passed, and if he could not do it in 5 more days, he would be rejected by this body. All the preparations he had made before would become a joke, and it would be a waste of time. At this moment, the waiter of the red dust inn was also slightly taken aback. He clearly did not realize why Lin Yuan, who had been silently killing people, would suddenly raise his head to look at him. "That's it?" Lin Yuan asked. "No," he answered. Lin Yuan raised his slender eyebrows and put Guan Shanshua back into the scabbard. He frowned and glanced at the corpses on the ground, which were full of fear, unwillingness, and other expressions. Yes. Lin Yuan's eyes suddenly lit up. He was missing one. The only one missing was the self-proclaimed Divine Martial Second, Azure Canopy King, Lei Xiaoming. While the Guan clan was no match for the Flying Star sect, they were not pushovers either. Only children would fight when there was no benefit. The Flying Star sect dared to target Guan Zhaoshan because Lei Xiaoming and the corpses were holding the Guan clan back, which led to the Guan clan's downfall, forcing Guan Zhaoshan to flee to the Red Dust Inn. She could not buy peace for the rest of her life even if she used up all her wealth. She had no choice but to take risks, which was why she summoned Lin Yuan. With so many dead, including the main culprit, how could Lei Xiaoming be left out? "Can you find Lei Xiaoming?" Lin Yuan turned around and looked at the shopkeeper, who was sweating profusely and had his head lowered behind the counter, working on an abacus. "Huh." The shopkeeper shuddered and did not control the strength in his hand well. The abacus in his hand instantly broke, and the beads rolled all over the floor. Lin Yuan was slightly stunned. "Am I that scary?" Bam. "It's still missing something. Guan Zhaoshan's dying wish is Lei Xiaoming. Can you find him?" Lin Yuan's slightly furrowed brows relaxed, and he repeated his words. Although he was unhappy, he could understand why the shopkeeper lost his composure. Although he was also a cultivator who roamed the Lulin and was used to killing and death, but Lin Yuan, who killed hundreds of people as indifferently as eating and drinking, who killed hundreds of people without even blinking his eyes, was not something those Jianghu fights could compare to. It was reasonable for his heart to palpitate for a moment. After all, his current state of mind was more like treating human lives like grass. Although he was not like ordinary demonic beasts who could kill and eat humans without any qualms, or even to the extent of treating cultivators with cultivation as delicacies, he was not much stronger. But no matter how many times the shopkeeper killed, stole, and did dirty work, he was still a human in the end. Maybe he was many times more evil than demon beasts, but in terms of temperament he was not as good as demon beasts. That was normal. Those born in a civilized society were basically like this. Although the Xinwu dynasty could not be compared to his previous life, it was still more civilized than the world of demon beasts. The shopkeeper hesitated for a moment, then he gritted his teeth and said, "Reporting to the Dragon King, it is not difficult to find Lei Xiaoming. Our previous search team did not fail to find Lei Xiaoming, the main culprit, but, Lin Yuan's brows twitched slightly, and his anger burst forth. The shopkeeper trembled again and his teeth kept chattering. It was difficult for him to speak clearly, but Lei Xiaoming had a son. He was born stupid, but he was born with great strength. At the age of 14, he tore a wisdom state demon beast apart with his mortal body. He was valued by Reverend Yunhe Guanhe and was taken in as a disciple. Now Lei Xiaoming is hiding in Yunhe Guanhe. We have already negotiated, but Yunhe Guanhe is not willing to hand him over." "Yunhe Guanhe?" Lin Yuan was silent for a moment. It was not far from Jianghu City. It could even be said that it was in the outskirts of Jianghu City. The scale was not big. Other than Reverend He, the head of the temple, there were only 3 other disciples. Lei Xiaoming's son should be one of them. Because of this relationship he was protected by Reverend He. Reverend He's cultivation could not be said to be profound. He was just an ordinary Kongming state cultivator. In terms of strength he was definitely not as good as Yan Xingqi, who was known as one of the twin stars of 10,000 swords in the past. However, his background was extremely complicated. It was said that there was more than one guardian of the heavenly gate behind him. His first disciple and second disciple were predetermined disciples of the guardians of the heavenly gate. Only the third disciple, who was born stupid but had great strength, was the disciple that Reverend He wanted to pass on his mantle. Offending Reverend He was equivalent to offending at least 2 guardians of the heavenly gate. And the third disciple was the disciple that he wanted to pass on his mantle. It was impossible for him to hand over the third disciple. Troublesome. Lin Yuan's brows were tightly knitted. His gaze was cold and he began to think carefully. Chapter 800. The shopkeeper's lips trembled slightly, and he fell silent for a moment. Although the Red Dust Society's influence was not small, it was not to the extent that they could find out everything. For example, the fact that there were at least 2 guardians of the Heavenly Gate behind Spiritual Master He was not a secret that the Red Dust Society had the authority to know. However, this did not prevent the shopkeeper from being in awe of Spiritual Master He. This was because the small Cloud Crane Temple was quite famous in the south. From time to time, the leader of a large force would bring their geniuses to visit the Cloud Crane Temple, hoping that Spiritual Master He would accept them. However, there were very few people who had succeeded so far. Even so, those experts who had walked a long way in the Kongming realm did not dare to be dissatisfied with Spiritual Master He. If there was a conflict, it would be the various forces in the south who took the initiative to avoid the existence of the Cloud Crane Temple. To put it ironically, even if a chef from the Cloud Crane Temple did not have a cultivation base, his status in the cultivation world of the south was not inferior to that of a disciple who was heavily nurtured by a first-rate sect. If it were any other matter, the shopkeeper might have already persuaded Lin Yuan to let Lei Qiuming go. However, the Red Dust Society had records of the descent of a god, so he wisely chose to remain silent. As for Lin Yuan, although he felt that it was troublesome, he had no intention of backing down. Lin Yuan actually did not care about the body of Guan Zhaoxin, but if he wanted to give up, it would obviously depend on the occasion. Not to mention that the system wanted to hang a knife over his head. Even if this did not happen, a mere spiritual master he was not enough to make him bow his head. Unless the guardian of the Heavenly Gate behind him appeared, then Lin Yuan would have to consider whether it was worth it to rush over. Back when they were dividing the cake in the northern frontier, the forces under the guardian of the Heavenly Gate were trying to curry favor with Lin Yuan. In the end, Lin Yuan used a sneaky move to divide the benefits, and no one gained any advantage. At least, no one was able to pull Lin Yuan, the reincarnated demon emperor of the ancient demon court, onto their warship. Not long after, the Heavenly Gate Guardian threw the Sky Demon's mess to Lin Yuan. This was not a big deal. After all, Lin Yuan had pulled a tiger's skin, so he could not blame others for making use of this point. If Lin Yuan was unable to punish the Sky Demon, the Guardian of the Heavenly Gates would naturally take action. However, Lin Yuan would most likely be punished as well. Now, if he was forced into a corner, he really did not mind boarding someone's ship. Forming a community of interest with a portion of people was obviously better than not offending anyone and not pleasing anyone. However, he would lose a certain amount of freedom. However, Lin Yuan's cultivation had reached this stage. Once he became a true god, his strength would basically change with each passing day. This kind of restriction would not be maintained for long. After thinking for a moment, Lin Yuan's eyes focused. He said in a deep voice, "Help me send a letter. Say that I'll personally make a trip to the Cloud Crane Temple in 2 days. I'll take care of the rest. Your main focus now is to gather the various forest forces in the south. I don't ask for everyone, but at least 80% of them. This shouldn't be difficult, right? We'll do our best." The shopkeeper had a bitter expression. He cupped his fists at Lin Yuan and responded in a deep voice. Now, no one knew what Lin Yuan wanted to do by gathering the various forest forces in the south. However, what was certain was that if Lin Yuan asked the Ether Association to handle this matter, even if the forest forces were dissatisfied, they would not show it on their faces. However, if the Red Dust Society were to handle this matter, everyone would probably have a simmering expression. This was because in the eyes of the forest forces, the Red Dust Society definitely did not have any proper business. The reason why they had issued this summons was to declare their sovereignty. They wanted to see how many people would give them face when they had the support of the Ether Association, and how many people would bite the bullet and not listen to the summons. Currently, the Red Dust Society only had this in name. If they were to become the chief of the forest forces in the south in the future, who knew how they would torment them? This was like a newly ascended boss who had not even had the time to use the carrot and stick. Instead, he had already teased his subordinates. Their favorable impressions and reputation would plummet. Even so, did the Red Dust Society still have the right to refuse? To put it bluntly, the Red Dust Society's overall strength was indeed the best in the forest forces in the south. However, when the other forces joined forces to fight against the Red Dust Society, it was not a matter of pride. No matter how great the grudge was, when the Red Dust Society came knocking on their door, it would not affect their unity. If it had not been for Lin Yuan's declaration, the Red Dust Society would not even have had the chance to tease the forest forces. Moreover, their boss had already waved his hand and handed the entire Red Dust Society to Lin Yuan. At this moment they could be said to be Lin Yuan's servants. 2 days later, Lin Yuan's eyes narrowed. He turned over and got out of bed, hanging Guan Shanxue behind his waist and sighing softly. The Red Dust Society did not get any benefits. Although he was working for Lu Xian, he had no intention of submitting to him. As such, the breakthrough mission was not completed for a long time, and his cultivation was stuck at the peak of the airborne realm, unable to make any progress. If he went all out, it would not be difficult for him to go 200 to 300 rounds with a Heavenly Star Realm expert. If he were to go all out, it would not be difficult for Lin Yuan to go all out. Even if he were to encounter a half-step Kongming Realm expert like the Red Dust Society, Lin Yuan would be able to escape unscathed. However, with such strength, there was no way he could compete with a genuine Kongming Realm expert. Spiritual Master Lin Yuan tightened his grip on the sword. A cold light flashed in his eyes as he said in a hoarse voice, "I hope you know what you're doing." With Guan Zhaoshan's basic attributes, even if he were to squeeze out a bit of qi and blood to nourish the blade from time to time, it would be able to greatly increase the power of the blade nurturing technique. Moreover, Lin Yuan had been running the blade nurturing technique for the past 2 days with all his might, taking a lot of food and pills to nourish his blood and qi every day, repeatedly tempering the blood and qi on the blade. It was hard to say if the blade could kill a Kongming Realm expert, but what was certain was that the blade would most likely be destroyed. Even if it did not shatter on the spot, it would not be able to be used again until he found suitable materials to repair it. Under the situation where he did not consume the power of incense to perform his own skills, the blade was Lin Yuan's greatest reliance. If he were to lose the power of the blade, it would be tantamount to cutting off one of his arms. Therefore he would try to avoid the blade as much as possible. With a thought, he darted out and crossed half of Jianghu City in the blink of an eye. After all, Guan Zhaoshan's basic attributes were there. Although he was only at the peak of the airborne realm, his speed was only a few hundred points lower than Lin Yuan's own. Using the Thousand Mountains blade technique was enough to make up for the difference in attack attributes. If there was any advantage Lin Yuan's own body had, it would be the absolute defense under the blessing of the Jiao Dragon Scale armor. Even someone with a special constitution like Guan Zhaoshan could not surpass Lin Yuan in this attribute. Chapter 801. 15 minutes later. At the foot of Mount Cloud Crane, Lin Yuan took a leisurely stroll and walked up the mountain step by step. He knew that the Red Dust Society did not have much influence, but he never thought that Enlightened Master he would throw away the visiting card that the Red Dust Society had sent in his name. It was as if he really did not intend to give Lin Yuan any face. Indeed, Enlightened Master he could ignore Guan Zhaoshan, but since he had the Heavenly Gate Guardian standing behind him, he should know who was hiding under Guan Zhaoshan's skin. Enlightened Master Junior Lin Yuan has come to pay a visit. Lin Yuan paused in his steps and roared in a cold voice. The scenery in front of him was still beautiful, but Lin Yuan's intuition told him that there was a great terror ahead. Special constitutions were usually favored by luck. In addition to Lin Yuan's intuition as a demon beast and his clear perception of all things after cultivating the divine way, even Lin Yuan himself found it hard to convince himself that it was an illusion. Enlightened Master he had probably already expected this. Throwing away the visiting card would be of no use, and he would definitely not let the matter rest. Therefore, before he came to Mount Cloud Crane, he had already done something on the path that Enlightened Master he would definitely pass through. Since I didn't accept your visiting card, I don't welcome you to pay a visit to the mountain. But you still came. That's fine, I'll wait on the mountain. If you have the ability to climb the mountain, I'll accept whatever methods you have. If you don't have the ability to climb the mountain, then it's better for you to return home. Enlightened Master he's aged voice rang out from the void. Soon after, he laughed coldly and said, "Don't blame me for not warning you beforehand. In front of you is a great formation that uses Mount Cloud Crane's spirit vein as its foundation. It's a formation that combines killing and confusion. It was created by a senior expert and even I don't know much about it. If you're trapped in the formation, I may not be able to open it in time to save your life." Lin Yuan raised his eyebrows slightly. He had read a lot about the mountain guarding formation in novels, but this was the first time he had come across such a thing in reality. Although the sects in the north also had such formations, they were completely defenseless against the soldiers of the northern frontier. In the end, it all depended on the combat strength of both sides. However, the array formation on Mount Cloud Crane was connected to the spirit vein, and its energy was boundless. It was clearly not easy to break through. If he were to force his way through, it would mean that he would have to battle the entire spirit vein by himself. If he were to break through the formation, it would mean that the spirit energy within Mount Cloud Crane's spirit vein would be completely destroyed by him. It would be extremely difficult for the entire mountain range to absorb any more spirit energy, and who knew how long it would take for it to recover. It was not that Lin Yuan cared about the environment or that he was compassionate. Although Mount Cloud Crane was dominated by Cloud Crane Temple, there were countless cave abodes of itinerant cultivators and monster lairs. If he were to destroy the spirit vein, it would be equivalent to forcing them to move away. If he were to encounter an unlucky person who happened to be cultivating in seclusion, he would basically be unable to escape the fate of failing to break through. If he were to be unlucky, it was not impossible for him to go through chi deviation or die on the spot. Therefore, not only was it immoral, it was also easy to make enemies. Of course, this was based on the premise that Lin Yuan had the ability to destroy the spirit vein. Lin Yuan stood in front of the formation. His strange eyes flashed and he stepped into it, continuing to climb up the mountain. Stupid system. Get to work. Lin Yuan, you're pole vaulting in the latrine. That's too much. Now that you're in someone else's killing formation and you're expecting me to break it, you'd better be more polite with your words. The system scolded him. Lin Yuan's face was expressionless as he sneered in his heart. I don't care anyway. Now that Guan Zhaoshan is gone, I don't have to worry about you forcefully taking over this body. Even if I die here today, my spirit will only be damaged. After returning to my main body to recuperate for a period of time, I'll be alive and kicking. If you have the ability, don't say anything and I'll charge in as I please. Ding. Take 71 steps forward and wait for 3 breaths. Then take 3 steps to the right. The system was still scolding, but it obediently pointed out the life gate for Lin Yuan. It could not be helped. Regardless of whether Guan Zhaoshan's body landed in Lin Yuan's or his hands, it would become an important combat force in the future. It would be invincible among those below the level of a true god. It could even be used as a one-time item and was comparable to a nuclear weapon. Lin Yuan could ignore it because Guan Zhaoshan's existence was also a huge threat to him. However, the system could not ignore it. If it could obtain control of Guan Zhaoshan, it would be equivalent to a wave of ascension and hanging a knife over Lin Yuan's head. At least before Lin Yuan became a true god, there would be plenty of opportunities to educate Lin Yuan on how to respect it, the source of the heavenly axiom. Lin Yuan obeyed silently. A chill ran down his spine and a looming murderous intent surrounded him. Lin Yuan had no doubt that as long as he took a wrong step, this formation based on Mount Cloud Crane's spirit vein could instantly tear him apart. Draw your sword and slash forward. The system reminded him again. With this body's reaction and speed, Lin Yuan drew his sword almost instantly after the system's reminder. Immediately after, he felt the blade in his hand sink and his body sway slightly. He almost subconsciously took a step back to reduce the force. However, at that moment, due to the alarm bells ringing in his heart, Lin Yuan gritted his teeth and endured the strange force produced by the collision between the unknown object and Guan Shanxue. Therefore, Lin Yuan even felt his cheeks burning and the blood in his chest churning. Charge forward as fast as you can. Stop only when I tell you to. Damn, the person who set up the formation is a little strange. I almost King misjudged him. The system seemed to be in an extremely bad mood and scolded him again. In reality, the system's bad mood was not because of Lin Yuan's attitude, but because the person who set up the formation was too strange. He even directly ignored some basic rules to set up this formation. If it were an ordinary formation master trying to break the formation, he would have lost his life immediately. For any world, formations were not difficult to understand. This was because most of them were derived from algebra. Other than a few formations that were naturally formed by heaven and earth, logic lines could be found in most other formations. For example, if there were 3 passages in front of you and 2 of them were dead ends, then the remaining one would be a life. Otherwise, if the formation failed, even a layman would be able to quickly see the flaws and would not step into the passage at all. To a formation master, this was a huge failure. However, Lin Yuan drew his sword not because the system's instructions were wrong, but because the person who set up the formation had guessed that someone would be able to see the life of the formation and deliberately set up a hidden killing formation at the place where the life gathered. If the person who entered the formation did not block it, this hidden killing formation would instantly tear him apart. However, if he blocked it and failed to control his strength, he would directly enter a dead end as soon as he took a step forward. This was a huge taboo. There were 50 great Daos and 49 were derived from heaven. The rules, that even the heavenly Tao had to abide by, were openly ignored. This made it very angry. Chapter 802. Lin Yuan, take 3 more steps forward and 7 more steps to the right, and you will reach the exit. I reckon that there are other traps in this evil array, especially the last exit. Even if someone managed to break through the previous traps in one go, they should let down their guard here. You have to be careful. Don't fall into the trap after taking 99 steps out of 100. The system took the initiative to remind him. Beep. Touching an evil array triggered a mission. Enforce justice on behalf of the heavens. Mission name. Enforce justice on behalf of the heavens. Description. The array master who set up this array followed the rules of the array and left a chance for those who entered the array. However, he set up traps in the place where the chance for life gathered to plot against those who had the ability to break the array. This is equivalent to not leaving any chance for life. This behavior has violated one of the supreme rules. Please find the array master and kill him to correct the heavens. Mission reward. Depends on the degree of completion. Punishment for failure. None. The moment the mission was triggered, before Lin Yuan could even take a step, the system began to send out question marks. Lin Yuan was silent for a moment and asked doubtfully, "You didn't take your medicine today, did you? Do you think I don't have enough trouble?" Being able to mobilize the spiritual power of a mountain range to connect with the array, such a method might not be able to find a single array master in the entire north who could compete with it. Therefore, the person who set up this evil array was most likely a guardian of the divine gate or an old monster who had survived countless years ago. However, no matter which one it was, this guy would not be easy to deal with. Furthermore, wasn't this mission a waste of time? Although you are the origin of the heavenly axiom, and this world may have been separated from the primeval world, this world has its own will. It is not appropriate for an outsider like you to meddle in other people's business, right? You are the one who didn't take your medicine. This mission was not issued by me. When have you seen me give you a mission without any punishment for failure? This is a privilege, do you know? Just like when a great era arrives in every world, the heavenly axiom will bestow great fortune upon certain life forms, turning them into the main characters of the era, using this to achieve certain goals. Or perhaps, it's just to dispel the boredom of eternal existence. However, this kind of giving without asking for anything in return is a privilege that belongs solely to the will of the world. For an outsider like me to give you a mission, you have to pay attention to an equal exchange. At this moment, the system was no longer cursing. It was even a little exasperated. What the hell is this? How did he trigger a mission? Suddenly, the system sent out an ellipsis, and a layer of cold sweat appeared on Lin Yuan's forehead. His mission had come from the system, which was the heavenly Tao source. To be able to give him a mission in front of the heavenly Tao source, it had to be in existence on the same level as the heavenly Tao source. In other words, this mission had come from the world will of the heaven martial world. An incomplete world will, an incomplete heavenly Tao source, it seemed like they were really the same? After all, the heaven martial continent was most likely separated from the Great Desolation world, and its will was indeed an incomplete version of the Great Desolation world's heavenly Tao. If it was not, then the fun would be even bigger. If the heaven martial world was an independent world, once it completed the 3 realms and 6 Taos, the world will would directly leap to an existence on the same level as the Great Desolation world's heavenly Tao. Its power was not something that the incomplete heavenly Tao source could compare to. It could now bypass the system and give him a mission. If it was complete, then what would happen? The mission it gave out today was not mandatory for Lin Yuan to complete. The reward would be based on the degree of completion. As long as Lin Yuan participated in this matter, even if the evil array master died in an accident or due to old age, Lin Yuan would still be able to get the reward. On the other hand, even if he did not participate in this mission, he would not be in any danger. But in the future, what if it gave Lin Yuan another mission? This fellow did not need to abide by the rules of equal exchange. Lin Yuan even felt that a blood-red danger word had appeared above his head. Don't look at me, I still don't understand how it used my authority to give you a mission. Since I don't know how it did it, then it did not give you a mission. How can I break this? There is no way to break this. However, the last time this fellow fought with me, it was to fight for your freedom, and also to place a piece to complete the world a step further. So in the short term, it will definitely not harm you. After all, you are the king of hell that it has already decided. So I guess the reward for this mission is extremely generous, you should just do it honestly. Strictly speaking, the system had fought with this world's will 3 times, and it had been at a disadvantage all 3 times. The first time was when Lin Yuan had consumed the dragonification root, and the other party had directly invaded. Although the system had reacted in time, it had not succeeded. Lin Yuan had still mutated and possessed the power to shape the Netherworld River and open up the Netherworld soil, thus becoming the King of Hell. The second time was when Lin Yuan had chased after Lin Yuan. Although the system had concealed Lin Yuan's aura, Lin Yuan had not dared to continue staying in the northern frontier. He could only head to the Endless Sea, which led to the subsequent series of events. This was the third time. This time the system did not even realize how the other party had attacked and was immediately checkmated. This world's will was growing, and it was growing at an extremely fast speed. Fortunately, it was still on his side now. Lin Yuan, am using double the cheat? Shaking his head, Lin Yuan sighed softly. This trashy system had caused him to tremble with fear, but it still had no way to solve it. However, now was not the time to dwell on this matter. It was better to get out of this evil array as soon as possible, find perfected he, and ask for Lei Qiuming as well as ask about the evil array master. Following the system's instructions, Lin Yuan walked out of the array safely. His gaze swept over the surroundings, and only then did he let out a long breath of turbid air. The backup plan that he had imagined did not appear. It was as if the other party had not thought that the person who had entered the array would really be able to reach this place, so they had not made any preparations. The scalp-numbing sense of danger was also all behind him. Boom. Just then a loud sound was heard. Lin Yuan raised his head and saw a sallow and emaciated figure with messy hair like withered grass hurtling towards him like a cannonball. It was so fast that even the eye of the god could only see an afterimage. He raised his saber to block. The figure's fist had already reached him. Guan Shanshua's silver-white saber was directly smashed into a C shape, and it almost imprinted directly on Lin Yuan's body. At the same time, a faint layer of white frost had already condensed on the tip of the other party's fist. Only then did he stop punching Lin Yuan. However, this person did not have the slightest intention of retreating. He just shook his fist on the spot, and the frost was directly thrown to the ground, turning into a pool of water and soaking into the soil. Chapter 803. Seamless Body. Lin Yuan's eyes narrowed slightly, and a tinge of fear appeared on his face. Back in the Fire Kirin's grotto heaven, Lin Yuan had found someone with an innate seamless body among the imprisoned orcs. However, the Fire Kirin later revived and the grotto heaven was destroyed. Given the strength of that little guy, there was no way that he could have survived. It was just that he did not expect to encounter a second seamless body after such a long time. It was true that the seamless body was not a special constitution. It was just an ability that would naturally appear when one's body's potential was developed to a certain extent. Even if one was born with a seamless body, they would at most be considered good seedlings for martial arts. However, they were completely incomparable to Guan Zhaoshan, who truly had a special constitution. It was not that there were no warriors in the Jianghu world such as Lu Hu and Sunan. However, without exception, those people were generally of lower status. That was because the path of warriors was much more difficult than that of cultivators. Before reaching the Heaven Strength realm, warriors could easily beat up cultivators of the same level. They could even wrestle with monsters of the same level. However, when warriors cultivated to the extreme, the most they could do was to condense their internal force into spiritual qi. To be able to reach such a level in Lin Yuan's previous life, they would have been considered masters or innate stage experts. At the same time, they would have developed their bodies to the extreme, and they could easily win against cultivators of the airborne realm. However, that was the limit of the path of warriors. Unless one could reach the legendary Earth God realm and enter the path of martial arts, only then would they be able to compete with cultivators of the Heaven Strength realm. However, this was Mount Cloud Crane, perfected he's territory. As an existence that had the backing of the heavenly gates guarding it, even if the Cloud Crane Temple did not have any ordinary people, those who came and went were definitely big shots in the cultivation world of the South or disciples with monstrous natural endowments. How could a human ancient martial art practitioner suddenly appear here? It was not that all the cultivators in this world looked down on warriors, but under normal circumstances, ordinary warriors without any background were not even qualified to make friends with them. With Jinrenhe's cultivation and status, taking in a warrior was a very shameful thing. This little girl is quite knowledgeable. The cultivator sneered and said in a deep voice, This saber of yours is not bad. It can inject cold poison into the opponent's body. If this drags on for too long, even if you don't want your life, it will destroy the opponent's foundation. It is very sinister. Speaking up to this point, he paused for a moment before continuing with a smile. It's a pity that you met a cultivator like me who has cultivated the seamless body. It's like a mouse meeting a cat. Not to mention using insidious means, you can't even escape even if you want to. He wasn't being conceited. After all, he had cultivated the seamless body. The cold poison couldn't corrode him at all. He had wasted one of Lin Yuan's special suffixes at the start of the battle. If Lin Yuan was only capable of this, he would have to give up his life here today. What is your relationship with Taoist Master He? Lin Yuan's eyes narrowed slightly as he asked indifferently. Boom. The cultivator didn't have the intention to talk nonsense with Lin Yuan. He rushed forward again and punched at Lin Yuan's face. Cultivation nourished one's nature and cultivators strengthened their bodies. Although this cultivator couldn't suppress Lin Yuan in any way, the qi and blood surging in his body were like a dragon. His every movement caused the airflow, which immediately made Lin Yuan feel as if he was sinking into a swamp. His movements slowed down for no reason. This time he couldn't even lift his saber to block the attack. Buzz. The cultivator's fist landed on Lin Yuan's face, but it made a dull noise. It was like this punch didn't hit a body of flesh and blood, but a solid big bell. Under the counterforce, the cultivator pulled back in pain and shook his right hand. Seeing that the injury was beginning to heal, his face showed a relieved expression. Then he looked up at Lin Yuan and said coldly, "You little girl, you have a lot of insidious tricks." In his knowledge, a body of flesh and blood wouldn't have a texture comparable to metal. At least, among the powerful cultivators he knew, none of them had cultivated to this level. At most, they were tall, muscular, and had a strong ability to resist attacks. Therefore, when he failed to kill the enemy with one blow, his first reaction was that Lin Yuan had used some insidious trick again, like the cold poison lingering on the long saber in his hand. But even so, he had nothing to fear. The physique of a cultivator was not stronger than that of a demonic beast of the same level, but it was about the same. As long as the wound could heal, he could continue to fight. On the contrary, no matter how insidious the methods this girl had prepared in advance, there would be a time when they would be exhausted. However, when he looked up, he saw Lin Yuan's pretty face. At this moment, it had turned completely golden, like the Buddha statues in temples made of real gold. It even looked dazzling. "You. What the hell are you?" The cultivator's voice trembled slightly. A living person had turned into a golden statue in front of his eyes. This was beyond his understanding. Even a cultivator wouldn't be able to do something like this, right? I just added a buff to myself. It's a small matter. Lin Yuan grinned and raised Guanshanshui in her hand. She said coldly, "Since you don't want to talk nicely, I'll break your hands and feet first. Let's see if you can still behave." The silver-white long saber danced and the cold air leaked out. It vaguely condensed into white snowflakes. As Lin Yuan's saber danced faster and faster, the snowflakes gradually increased. Then they condensed into a pure white snow mountain suspended above Lin Yuan's head. Although the Thousand Mountains saber technique was a second-rate martial art, it was not inferior to the offensive techniques of the first-rate forces in the Jianghu continent. Especially when it was practiced to the advanced level, a casual saber move would be like 1,000 mountains. Lin Yuan's Thousand Mountains saber technique had not yet reached the advanced level. At most, it could be considered a beginner. It was a fool's dream to condense the power of a mountain to deal with Jinren He who was in the Kongming realm. But to suppress a cultivator in the transformative realm was just a piece of cake. Alarm bells rang in the martial artist's heart. He didn't even have time to think before he suddenly punched out with his right hand. The wind from his fist shook like a cannonball. The saber fell and the snow mountain fell as well. The fist wind and the snow mountain collided. In an instant, half of the snow mountain collapsed. However, that was all. "Kneel down." Lin Yuan's eyes were wide open as he suddenly shouted. Half of the snow mountain came crashing down, and a huge force poured down. Even a cultivator at the peak of the airborne realm, or even stronger, could not withstand it. He knelt in front of Lin Yuan with one knee. His face was flushed, and he put his hands up in a holding position, forcibly holding the remaining half of the snow mountain. Only then did he not get crushed into a pile of meat paste. Although it was just a fake snow mountain condensed by Lin Yuan's saber technique, the suppressive force of the Thousand Mountain saber technique was not to be trifled with. Chapter 804. If it had been an ordinary airborne realm cultivator taking on that attack, they would have been squashed into minced meat. Even the mountain-shaking ape, which was known to be the strongest in the wisdom realm, only dared to use the name mountain-shaking instead of mountain-holding ape. If monsters could not do it, humans of the same level would not have been able to do it either. Therefore this martial artist did indeed have some skills. A punch to the chest and a punch to the face. Every move was fatal. Ordinary warriors would not have been as ruthless as you. While the fist technique is simple, it was able to mobilize the power of qi and blood to seal the target's movements. You must have some background. Lin Yuan stretched out his hand and touched his chin. A playful look appeared in his eyes as he smiled and said, "Judging from your age, you are only around 30 years old, yet you are already able to cultivate to the transcendent realm. Apart from your talent, I'm afraid that you are not lacking in cultivation resources on a daily basis. Therefore you should be from the military and your status in the south is not low. Furthermore, you appeared on Mount Cloud Crane to ambush me. In that case, you should be Lei Qiuming's personal guard. Is he so sure that I will die here?" The person who set up the evil formation was so vicious that he was comparable to Cyrus of the Endless Sea. However, he did not set up any traps at the exit. That was because one would have to constantly calculate if they wanted to break through the evil formation. The consumption of energy was one aspect. Even if they found the way out, they would have to deal with the traps set up by the person. The slightest carelessness in the formation would have led to death. As such, every time they attacked they would have to go all out. It was already impressive to be able to make it this far. However, there was a limit to every living being. Walking out of the evil formation would have exhausted one's energy. Any person with a high level of cultivation could easily take the life of the person who broke through the formation. Naturally, there was no need to waste resources on setting up traps. If there was someone who could easily pass through the evil formation and still be at their peak, theoretically speaking, it was impossible. That was because at such a level, there was no need to break through the formation at all. They could have just destroyed the spirit vein on Mount Cloud Crane. Why would they have to take off their pants and fart? However, the guy who arranged the evil array probably didn't expect that there would be such a freak as Lin Yuan in the world. He entered the array without the slightest calculation. Every step he took was inspired by the system. In addition, he had a keen sense of danger to determine how much effort he should spend to deal with the hidden hand. This trip was not without consumption, but for Guan Zhaoshan's terrifying physique, it was actually no different from his peak state. The martial artist's face turned cold, but he didn't say anything. However, Lin Yuan nodded his head indifferently and sneered, "It's good that he's confident. If he didn't believe that I would die here, he might have secretly run away. I spent so much effort if it was for nothing." Before he finished speaking, Lin Yuan suddenly slashed forward with his saber. A cold wind swept out, but it was easily blocked by a little Taoist boy who looked to be about 14 or 15 years old. "Layman Guan, the Abbey Dean said that since you have broken through the protective mountain array, even if you are an uninvited guest, he has no choice but to accept your visit to the mountain. He specially ordered me to come down and invite Layman Guan up the mountain for a chat." The little Taoist boy looked like a porcelain doll carved out of jade, but there was not the slightest bit of smoke and fire on his body. His big eyes were filled with a lot of blood vessels, which added a bit of a ferocious aura to him. Although he asked Lin Yuan to go up the mountain, his feet did not move at all. Instead he looked straight at Lin Yuan. That kind of cold gaze was not unfamiliar to Lin Yuan. That was the gaze of someone looking at a corpse. "I have hands and feet, why do I need you to lead the way? Could it be that the remaining path is more dangerous than this evil formation?" Lin Yuan slowly lifted Guan Shanxue up and grinned hideously, "The dignified Jinren He, a reputable true cultivator. I thought that your reputation was not in vain, so I came here personally. In the end, you used the protective mountain array to stop me from going up the mountain, and then found a martial artist to test my skills. Until now, you don't even dare to show your true body, and you want to use a demon puppet to fool me?" The demon puppet was another old object that Lin Yuan had seen before. Before Zhanshan City was destroyed, the old ancestor of the Lu clan possessed the demon puppet and followed the demon-subduing group into the mountain to search for Lin Yuan. In the end, the demon puppet was defeated by Lin Yuan. In the end, the demon puppet was possessed by Fang Tian and escaped. After Zhanshan City was destroyed, Fang Tian, who was possessed by Fang Tian, turned into a demon from hell and chased after Lin Yuan for a long time. Until now, he still could not find the whereabouts of the demonized Fang Tian. It was as if he had evaporated into thin air, like a bomb buried in the northern frontier, which made him very frustrated. Looking at the demon puppet now, those bad memories kept rising in Lin Yuan's mind, and his eyes turned cold. You know the demon puppet? Ah, good. It seems that my good-for-nothing son really lost his life in your hands. Good. Enemies are bound to meet on a narrow road. Since you have entered Mount Cloud Crane today, there is no need for you to leave. I will refine your spirit and turn it into a supplementary material for my cultivation. The Taoist boy laughed strangely, and the killing intent in his eyes became more intense. On the other hand, Lin Yuan was stunned. A good-for-nothing son? Thinking of this, Lin Yuan's gaze became increasingly strange when he looked at the Taoist boy. He did not know much about the ancestor of the Lu family, but he was at most a cultivator at the peak of the airborne realm. However, his methods were indeed strange. Before he was demonized, he escaped from the wise mountain-shaking ape, who used his life as fuel to temporarily step into the Mountain Lord realm. After that, he went on a killing spree in Mountain Blocking City. Whether it was the army of the Jianghu dynasty at that time, or the embroidered uniform guards in Yibusho at the northern frontier, they could not find this damn guy. Now that he thought about it, the Lu family's ancestor had so many trump cards that it was not something a small border family could take out. It turned out that he had a Void Realm father. Thinking about it, the Lu family took root in Mountain Blocking City because the ancestor of the Lu family wanted to conveniently extract the essence of demonic beasts to cultivate this strange evil technique. Enemies are bound to meet on a narrow road. Lin Yuan's gaze also became cold. Although this world did not have the 3 realms and 6 paths, the cycle of reincarnation still existed. However, this responsibility that should have been borne by the underworld was now handled by the will of the world. In a sense, although the Celestial, the Arch, and the Lord of the Underworld could be said to be the apex of gods and indispensable existences in a complete world, they were just workers for the will of the world. The Lu family's ancestor cultivated an evil technique that was far more evil than those of the Southern Demon cult. Whether it was being refined into a demonic puppet by this evil technique, or having their spirit and essence extracted, they would be directly squeezed dry. Their body and soul would be destroyed on the spot, and they would become a helping hand for others to cultivate. Although it was abhorrent to harm others, it was actually nothing in this world where the strong preyed on the weak. However, this evil technique would not only harm one's life, it would also prevent one from having a second life. Chapter 805. Boom. A bolt of lightning exploded in the air. The sky, which had been clear just a moment ago, was instantly filled with a torrential downpour. It was all about the actions, not the heart. There were some things that the Lord of Hades had to take care of. The expression on the little boy's face grew increasingly ferocious. He cackled and said, "You're not here in your true form. What can you do even if you borrow the power of the heavens? You're only at the pinnacle of the airborne realm right now. If I wanted to kill you, it would only take one breath." His voice came to an abrupt halt before he could finish. That was because Lin Yuan had already drawn his blade at that moment. Guan Shanshue's blade continued to tremble. The air was filled with the sound of the blade's aura, as if the blade was wailing. Blood chi, cold chi, and genuine chi gathered together and circled around Guan Shanshue's silver-white saber. When the saber fell, a blood dragon covered in frost armor had already whizzed out and crashed into the little Taoist boy. The little boy's face was filled with shock. He seemed to be unable to believe that someone at the pinnacle of the airborne realm was able to bring out such a terrifying attack. The little boy held his breath for a moment and raised his hand to perform hand seals. Beams of light shot out, but they were easily torn apart by the blood dragon. 2 breaths later, the blood dragon slammed into the little Taoist boy's chest and sent him flying. His body was torn apart in midair, and a large amount of blood splattered everywhere. Not even his bones were left on the spot. I indeed can't borrow the power of the heavens, but this rain is not rain. It's an all-encompassing net. Lin Yuan's eyes were calm. The Guan Shanshue in his hand cracked inch by inch. Black spiderweb-like cracks crawled all over the blade. The rain clouds were stacked on top of each other for hundreds of thousands of miles, and Lin Yuan's magical power of moving clouds and summoning rain had been activated to the extreme. The power of incense on the panel was constantly pulsating, and it began to decline rapidly at a frightening speed, just to support this terrifying heavy rain. The area covered by the rain clouds was Lin Yuan's domain. Even if something invisible wanted to pass through here, it would be directly sensed by Lin Yuan. Similarly, with a thought from Lin Yuan, the rain clouds in the sky would fall with the black water of the nether realm. Lin Yuan had used this trick to deal with the Northern Restoration Society. However, the scale of the Northern Restoration Society was incomparable. In addition, Lin Yuan was not in his original body at the moment. If it really came to that, the incense power he had obtained from trading with some members of the Red Dust Society might not be enough to burn. But apart from that, anything that wanted to enter or leave this area covered by heavy rain needed Lin Yuan's permission. Even Dao Initiation Realm cultivators could only watch helplessly. Only Supremes and above had the ability to force their way through this domain of burning Joss flame. Of course, the prerequisite was that they were willing to pay a large amount of Joss flame as the price. Haha, Lin Yuan, your saber strike is truly terrifying. Unfortunately, it can't kill me. Now even your saber is broken. What other means do you have to fight me? Today you must die. Spiritual Master He's voice rang out again. It was obvious that he was much weaker. Lin Yuan had used the saber nurturing technique to kill his demon puppet. Although it was not enough to take his life, it had definitely damaged his vitality. Even all the effort he had put into refining the demon puppet had gone down the drain. This resentment was even greater than when he found out that his only son had died at the hands of the Black Serpent. Lin Yuan stood in the rain with an indifferent expression. He calmly sheathed his saber. With a flip of his right hand, an ordinary oil paper umbrella appeared in his hand. Humph, you don't know what you're talking about. Even the rain was summoned by you. Are you holding an umbrella just to show off? Spiritual Master He seemed to be able to see Lin Yuan's every move. Therefore, when Lin Yuan sheathed his saber and took out his umbrella, he mocked him. He had already received news from the Guardians of the Gate of Heaven that Lin Yuan was not a native of this world. Instead, he was the same as the experts who had established the ancient demon court. He came from a world outside the Gate of Heaven. He even suspected that he came from a world that spread cultivation to the almighty experts of the Jianghu world. Even though he knew that Lin Yuan's saber strike was his trump card, he still did not let down his guard. He was worried that Lin Yuan had other tricks up his sleeves. If Lin Yuan had attacked the Cloud Crane Temple without caring about anything, he would have felt better. But now he had taken out an oil paper umbrella and looked like he was going to enjoy the rain. At the same time he was puzzled. At the same time he also felt that a great terror was rapidly approaching him. He had already tried. Even his spiritual sense could not penetrate this place covered by rain clouds. Clearly this rain was really as Lin Yuan had said. It was an inescapable net. Not to mention the state of the god descending. Even if Lin Yuan himself came, he would have to pay a big price to make such a strange rain. Naturally, it was impossible to just hold an umbrella at the foot of the mountain and quietly look at the Cloud Crane Temple. This guy can't be thinking of starving me to death, right? Lin Yuan did not open the oil paper umbrella. When once cultivation reached the airborne realm, they were already able to release spiritual qi. Those with a high cultivation level could directly use spiritual qi to control objects. Whether it was standing in the air or controlling all kinds of weapons in long-range combat, it was all based on this principle. Mere rain would not be able to touch a cultivator unless they wanted to. Things like umbrellas were for mortals to shelter from the rain. There's probably something wrong with this umbrella. Spiritual Master He sat in the temple and muttered with a gloomy expression. Spiritual Master, didn't you say that as long as this guy came to Mount Cloud Crane, he would definitely be able to? Gulp. Lei Xiaoming, whose face was pale, stood behind Spiritual Master He. Before he could finish speaking, he was glared at by Spiritual Master He's ruthless eyes. He could not help but swallow a mouthful of saliva and did not dare to continue. Deep down, however, he thought that this old thing was just fishing for fame. When he was bragging before, he patted his chest and said that the protective formation of Mount Cloud Crane was so powerful that even if Lin Yuan came to find him, he would not be able to break the formation. As long as he could stall for time until the god descended, all the dangers would be easily solved. But in the end? What a guy. Speaking of which, such a powerful formation of Mount Cloud Crane was only able to stall Lin Yuan for the time it took for an incense stick to burn. It even lost the strongest and most loyal guard captain by his side. Now, even Spiritual Master He himself was trapped in the temple by this strange rain, not daring to take a step out. It was as if he was waiting for Lin Yuan to take the initiative to attack. He wanted to rely on some of the arrangements in the temple to kill Lin Yuan. But then again, would things really go so smoothly? Lei Xiaoming felt a chill on his neck, but he did not dare to continue speaking. He just looked pitifully at Spiritual Master He, who was deep in thought. His mind was working quickly, thinking about how he should escape. Spiritual master. He glanced at Lei Qiuming from the corner of his eyes without batting an eyelid. His lips moved slightly, but he swallowed the words that were about to come out of his mouth. The entire Cloud Crane Temple suddenly fell into a dead silence. At the same time, Lin Yuan, who was at the foot of the mountain, merely reached out his hand and patted the oil paper umbrella. He said expressionlessly, "Stop sleeping. I'll treat you to an appetizer today, a hodgepodge. What do you think?" Chapter 806. In the oil paper umbrella. A blue bug slowly poked its head out, but it was smashed to pieces by a falling raindrop on the spot. A moment later, more and more blue bugs flew out of the oil paper umbrella, slowly forming a burly figure in front of Lin Yuan. It was Taotai who killed the demon kings in the endless sea like killing dogs. "I smell it, something delicious." Taotai turned his head, and his gaze fell on the Cloud Crane Temple. He sneered, "There won't be any trouble if I eat him, right?" Taotai was the same as Lin Yuan at this moment. It was just a consciousness that had descended, but in essence, its state was completely different from Lin Yuan's because its body was not in this world. These bugs were just some ordinary creatures that it relied on. Without the support of his consciousness, even raindrops could easily crush these bugs. But after Taoyu's consciousness descended, these bugs gathered together and erupted with power that could easily kill the existence of the Demon King realm. "If you only eat him, there won't be any trouble, but I guess you can't help it." Lin Yuan's gaze narrowed slightly and he also sneered, "There are 3 teenagers in the temple. 2 of them have extraordinary aptitudes, and are disciples that the guardian of the Elysium of this world has taken a fancy to. The other one has extraordinary talent, and once tore apart an intelligent demon beast with a mortal body. For you, these 3 teenagers are delicacies and you can't help it." "That's true." Taotai nodded with a serious face as if he didn't put the guardian of the Elysium in his eyes at all. There were countless cultivators in this world, but they had all fallen and decayed. The most elite part either died in the hands of Hongjuan's minions, or stepped out of the Elysium early and disappeared without a trace. They might have died in the Sea of Bitterness, or they might have gone to other worlds. As for the rest, even if their cultivation had reached the immortal and indestructible true God realm, they were just cowards who didn't even dare to step out of the Elysium. True gods of this level, compared to the huge host group behind Lin Yuan, were simply too weak to withstand a single blow. Of course there were troubles. However, if they were to really fall out, Lin Yuan would definitely not be the first to admit defeat. Furthermore, the guardian of the heavenly gate who placed his disciple under a rogue cultivator like Jinren He, who did not belong to any sect, would most likely not have a high level of cultivation. He would probably only be at the level of Taoism, which was on par with the demon kings in the endless sea. How could this be considered trouble? Obviously it didn't count. However, there is someone in the Taoist temple that I must kill. So, I'll eat the chowder soup and the 3 side dishes. You wait for a while. I'll take that person away. You can do whatever you want with the rest." Lin Yuan's tone changed as if he didn't care about human life at all. "All right. I'm used to seafood. It's not bad to eat some mountain food." Taotai nodded, his smile ferocious and terrifying. Meanwhile, a middle-aged man in a white robe was standing above the clouds, his face so gloomy that it was almost dripping water. The sudden appearance of the rain clouds was extremely strange. Even though he had exerted a Herculean effort, he still couldn't take half a step into the area shrouded in heavy rain. If that was all, it would be fine. Some powerful trapping arrays could also do it, but his divine sense couldn't pass through the area shrouded by the rain clouds. Coupled with the heavy rain, his vision was blurred. He simply didn't know what was going on inside. "Damn it. Damn Jinren He." The middle-aged man's face was ferocious as he growled, "I've already told you that the Black Jiao's origin is mysterious. If you can avoid being enemies with him, then don't be enemies with him. But for a mere gifted idiot you dare to fight the Black Jiao head-on. What a big deal." A moment later, a white bone carriage stood in the air. A pale-faced man in black poked his head out of the carriage, glanced at the middle-aged man and said in a hoarse voice, "I've asked." Lord Song said that this time the Black Jiao was really provoked by Jinren He. "With our strength we can't pass through these rain clouds." Lord Song said that even if he wanted to pass through here, he would have to pay a great price. "He wants us to go back home and not cause any more trouble." Fart. The middle-aged man roared with a gloomy face, "Those of you who have successors naturally don't care, but my inheritance has strict requirements. After 600 years, I've only met such a good seedling. You and I, although many times stronger than those in the Kongming realm, our lifespans are limited. Compared to those masters, how many 600 years can we have? The black-clothed man gently shook his head and said with a helpless expression, "Then what can you do? Right now, even Lord Song doesn't want to interfere. With our cultivation, let's just forget about it. We'll just treat it as if we didn't accept this disciple. Moreover, the general trend is about to change. There will be countless geniuses in the future. Are you still afraid that your inheritance will be cut off?" Umph. The middle-aged man snorted as if he didn't hear these words at all. Who didn't know that the general trend had changed? It wouldn't be long before a new era began. Countless geniuses would spring up like bamboo shoots after the rain. However, that was not the case. Geniuses were destined to rise in the great era. Even an immortal character like Lord Song would think of a way to recruit them. So what if he thought highly of some people? The black-clothed man shook his head and saw that the middle-aged man didn't take his advice seriously. He retracted his head and drove the carriage back in the direction he came from. Although his own disciples were also trapped in the rain at the moment, he was not short of disciples to such an extent, so he directly left. If this matter was over and the little guy was still alive, it would naturally be a good thing. Even if he died, it would not be a big deal. Anyway, he would not jump out to make a feud with Lin Yuan. "May I ask if you are the Black Water Dragon King of the Northern Frontier? I am Li Guhong of a lower immortal sect. Please meet me." After the black-clothed man left, the middle-aged man hesitated for a while before opening his mouth and shouting. Lin Yuan curled his lips and sneered, "This king has already sent a visiting card, and only today did he personally come to the door. I originally thought that they would be faster, but I didn't expect that now that things can't be cleaned up, they came to the door." Speaking of this, Lin Yuan sneered again and said in a strange tone, "If they had come earlier or delivered a message, there would have been enough time for them to take the disciple away. But now that things have developed to this point, they can't see any benefits from this, so they want to see this king and ask for a favor? There are many miraculous pills in this world, but there is no medicine for regret." Chapter 807. However, the traveling immortal sect is not easy to deal with. Taoya's expression changed slightly. He narrowed his eyes and said, "In my boss's world, the traveling immortal sect also exists. These guys are very strange. Strictly speaking, they should be itinerant cultivators. Each of them has their own inheritance, territory, and opportunities. Usually they don't like each other. It's not rare for the branches of the traveling immortal sect to fight each other. However, when they encounter an external enemy that they can't deal with, the branches will be unprecedentedly united. They will even help the other branches at all costs." Lin Yuan was silent. There were many forces that transcended worlds, and he knew of a few of them. However, almost all of these powerful existences had taken two different paths after the demon court was destroyed. Either they hid in the mortal world like Ravenfield Manor and formed a guild-like organization. Otherwise they would hide in the mountains and rivers. Unless something big happened, they would never show themselves. The traveling immortal sect was still active in the world as usual. Obviously, the force behind them was much stronger than other forces of the same level. "Then what do you say?" Lin Yuan asked indifferently. "Give them face." Tao Tai raised his finger and pointed at Lin Yuan. He laughed and said, "What does it have to do with me? This is the trouble you caused. Unless you plan to go up the mountain to solve the problem yourself. Otherwise, I will not let go of those little guys." "Got it. Go ahead." Lin Yuan nodded slightly and replied indifferently. Tao Tai was slightly stunned. He tilted his head and looked at Lin Yuan in confusion. He did not understand what Lin Yuan was thinking. However, he quickly adjusted his attitude and turned into a cloud of blue mist, enveloping the Cloud Crane Temple. Lin Yuan turned around indifferently and walked in the direction of the middle-aged man. Guardian of the Heaven Gate? Cultivator of the Dao Initiation Realm? He was just SOSO. The various forces in this world were very afraid of his existence. They coveted his resources but did not have the courage to fall out with him directly. They were afraid of the demon court behind him. But other than that, did these guardians of the Heaven Gate really take him seriously? Obviously not. When the northern frontier developed the Hengduan Mountains, Lin Yuan was in charge of all the errands. With a wave of their hands, the guardians of the heavenly gates took a large portion of the profits from Lin Yuan. In fact, there was no lack of people who wanted to pull Lin Yuan onto their worship. While they absorbed the large amount of benefits that Lin Yuan brought to them, they also hoped that Lin Yuan would be their cannon fodder and cut off the benefits from the other guardians of the heavenly gates. Lin Yuan flipped the table with the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas because the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas had shown their greed on their faces. They had no intention of giving Lin Yuan any face at all. They wanted to demand everything that Lin Yuan had worked hard for. From this point of view, although the guardians of the heavenly gate gave Lin Yuan some face, when it came to drinking blood and eating meat, they did not have the slightest intention of being polite. However, they restrained themselves and did not dare to ask Lin Yuan to work for free. Firstly, they were afraid of the demon court that might exist behind Lin Yuan. Secondly, they were afraid that the other guardians of the heavenly gates would fall out with them. However, this was not because they were afraid of Lin Yuan at all. This bad habit was obviously not good and had to be changed. The existence of rules was naturally necessary, but no rules could restrain a true superior. The current Lin Yuan was no longer the black snake with an unstable foundation in the northern frontier. In the past, he had to be afraid of too many people and could only bow his head. However, now not everyone was qualified to make him bow his head. At the very least, Dao integration cultivators were not qualified. Dao integration cultivators were only at the standard of ordinary demon kings in the endless sea. As for existences like demon kings, how many times had Lin Yuan offended them? The curtain of rain parted. Lin Yuan stood in the air with his hands behind his back. He looked at Li Guhong expressionlessly and said indifferently, "You have 3 breaths of time." Scram. Li Guhong's momentum faltered. Clearly, he did not expect Lin Yuan's attitude to be like this. In addition, from today onwards, Wandering Immortal Sect, Bone King Sect, Purple Dress Association, and other forces will no longer receive any benefits from the northern frontier. The forces under your name will also have to prepare to move in advance. If there are still people active in the northern frontier when they move south and establish the so-called 7th dynasty, don't blame me for not warning you. Without waiting for the middle-aged man to speak, Lin Yuan waved his hand as if he was shooing away flies. "Isn't the Dragon King's table manners a little too ugly?" Li Guhong's expression darkened slightly. He gritted his teeth and smiled. His eyes also turned cold. He originally only wanted to save the disciple he had his eyes on. He did not expect Lin Yuan to not discuss this matter with him at all. Instead, with a wave of his hand, he directly kicked out the forces led by a few Dao Initiation Realm cultivators from the group of cake eaters. If he just admitted it like this, the loss would be too great. The monthly income of the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce was almost comparable to the annual income of any dynasty. When Lin Yuan swallowed the remaining territories of the Xinwu dynasty, with his means, there was no guarantee that he would not combine the Hengduan mountain range and the endless sea to create even greater benefits. Even an immortal existence would not dare to say that he did not care about these resources. Now Black Jiao opened his mouth and wanted to kick him out. Based on what? My table manners are ugly? Lin Yuan smiled and shook his head. He said indifferently, "When this king was developing the northern frontier, you came to him and directly asked for a large amount of benefits. Did this king have the slightest hesitation? Because from then on, this king knew that there is only one sin in this world, and that is being weak. The weak side has never had the right to make decisions, right? This kind of thing was like a disease. It looked strange, but in reality, the only incurable disease in this world was poverty. In his previous life, even if he contracted a strange disease that could not be cured with the current medical technology, he could still seal himself in ice. Only when the medical technology could cure the disease would he be able to thaw it. On the other hand, the problem in the cultivation world was the same. There was never a problem that could not be solved. If there was, it was only because they were not strong enough. When Lin Yuan was weak, the Heavenly Gate Guardians could take the lion's share by opening their mouths. Now that Lin Yuan had become stronger, he could naturally open his mouth and kick out some of the Heavenly Gate Guardians who were weaker than him. Insignificant. Li Guhong's expression darkened. He gritted his teeth and wanted to say something. "You have 1 breath's time. If you don't get out of here, this king will take it as a declaration of war." Lin Yuan shrugged indifferently and said indifferently, "This king is not his original body anyway. Even if you kill this body, you can't hurt this king's foundation. But in the future, when I lead my army to the south, it will be the day that your legacy ends. You can try and see if this king can do such a thing." You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.